Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Matthew Chechy was born in 1989 to Louis and Sharon Chechy in Anaheim, California, USA. Matthew also had a 3-year-old brother and a big family who really loved him. He was particularly close to his parents who doted after him. His mother was never far away. They even went to the bathroom together. Matthew played a lot of baseball with his father. Father Louis has gone on record to say that his son Matthew was his very best friend. This branch of the Chechy family didn't get to see their extended family very often, but when they did meet, they tended to go on camping trips. Matthew felt safe with uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews and grandparents. Wherever he went, he was always surrounded by someone or several people who loved him deeply. And that is why what happened to little Matthew is so very heartbreaking and so very shocking. Oceanside, California is a coastal city known for its beautiful palm tree dotted beaches, the nearby Oceanside Harbour, marinas and its numerous shops. It is home to the California Surf Museum, which traces the sport's history and includes surfboard collections and exhibits of its most famous athletes. It's also home to the Oceanside Museum of Art, where countless sculptures, paintings, and other media from the city are displayed. Around 130,000 people live in Oceanside. It is a very popular tourist destination for people visiting California from outside, and it's also popular with people from within the state. On November 14, 1998, the entire Chechy family was at a dedicated camping area in Oceanside, California. They were once again getting together for their family reunion. They had reserved the entire area and only Louis Chechy was missing from the big meeting. He was sadly battling leukemia at the time and could not make the trip. However, Matthew was with Sharon and the rest of his extended family. Matthew told his mother that he wanted to go to the bathroom by himself, and despite her reservations, Mother Sharon agreed to her son's wishes, but made sure he was escorted by his aunt. She watched him walk into the bathroom and waited for him outside, but Matthew seemed to just be taking too long. Numerous men streamed in and out of the bathroom, and as time stretched on, she grew more and more worried. She eventually called out for Matthew after she saw a somewhat suspicious teen with a shaved head enter and exit the bathroom. What's going on? He'd hissed at her as he passed her by, and that had been enough to make her panic. After calling for him again and still getting no response, she rushed into the restroom, and this was followed by a blood-curdling scream. Matthew Chechy entered a public bathroom alone for what might have been the first time in his entire life. His aunt stood outside waiting for him, standing guard. She wanted to make sure he didn't feel as awkward or afraid of the different faces that he saw. She was just outside. And nervous as he was, Matthew took his time at the urinal. He never saw the attacker coming. A teenager much bigger than him stepped up behind Matthew. He grabbed him by the neck. The attacker was more than twice Matthew's weight. He simply would have been no physical match. The teen then pulled out a sharp hunting implement. He dragged it across Matthew from ear to ear. He then jabbed at him several more times before quickly exiting the bathroom. It was then that Matthew's aunt walked in. Her scream was a reaction to seeing Matthew laying on the bathroom floor. It was this scream that drew the attention of the entire camp. Dozens of people rushed in to try and revive Matthew, but everyone failed. Some small comfort was that Matthew passed away in the arms of the people that loved him the most. However, Matthew's ill father had to be told this information via a phone call. The police arrived at the scene minutes after Matthew's demise and cordoned off the area. However, they were unable to find their mysterious teen. Dozens of men were in and out of that public beachside restroom, and several of them had fled by the time that Matthew's aunt discovered him. The lack of CCTV cameras in 1998 meant that progress on this case was much slower than it would probably be today. However, the police caught a lucky break 2 days later when the killer struck again. This time his victim was a 40-year-old woman on her way to work. He had been unable to end her life in his initial attack, so he chased her down with his sharp implement and continued to jab at her. He would have succeeded in claiming his second life if the woman's co-workers had not been able to pull him off of her. Witnesses bravely held him down until the police arrived. The sharp hunting implement they recovered matched the wounds inflicted on Matthew. When they brought the teen in for questioning, the police discovered that they might have caught an unstable serial killer still in his infancy. The teen was Brandon Wilson. He started talking almost immediately after the interrogation started. Brandon Wilson was a drifter from St. Croix. He hadn't had a home since the age of 14, and he was a heavy user of illicit substances. He had had multiple substance-related arrests in the past, and local law enforcement was unfortunately familiar with him. He claimed to hear voices from God and participate in psychoactive substances. A psychiatrist determined that Wilson had delusions of grandeur and psychosis. He believed he was a special emissary of God, and that killing people was his unique way of collecting souls. Wilson seemed aloof, oddly comfortable, and even cheerful when he was challenged for his insane beliefs.
I let him fall to the ground. And I stabbed him one last time. Here. In the back. And so I stand up. Go ahead. Please. I stand up. Well, he's there, and I'm like, I mean, when I've been thinking about this, I was thinking that I wanted to take something from him, that I wanted to drink his blood or something, but I don't really think about doing it with this one.
So you wanted something from him, okay? So how many times did you stab him where did you stab him?
In the back.
Yeah, where?
Just once.
Okay, where though?
Right here.
Okay.
Okay, it's just...
Let me see where. Okay, and around there?
Yeah,
okay.
And it's just...
Show me where about the area.
Like right in there.
Okay, right in there. So you're doing it a lot of times there. You're doing it multiple times.
I did it once and
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
And, you know, I mean, it didn't...
Okay,
He was already dead, you know, I mean, I just did it, just to do it.
Okay, so you did it after you knew he was already dead. Okay, so let's say I'm the kid. Okay, let's act this out. Okay, are you with me on that? Okay. Let's say I'm here, and Tom, why don't you move over there for a second? Okay, Brandon, come on over here and show me. Okay, now, be gentle with me now, okay? Okay, I'm the kid. What am I doing?
You're pissed.
Okay, I'm taking a leak?
Yeah.
Okay, and what do you do now? Show me.
Okay, I walk around you this way and you look at me.
Okay, I look over like this?
And I you say that, but I kind of smile and I nod.
Okay.
I smile and I nod. You know me.
Okay.
I'm going to kill you.
Does he look back?
Yeah, then he looks back.
Okay, then what happens?
I stop. I take out my knife.
Okay. I noticed you pulled out your knife like that. Is that where you had it?
I have it right here.
Okay, that's cool. Then what happens?
I take it out like this.
Right.
I got it all figured out. I got it put in the sheath the right way so the sharp end is here.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
I go up behind him.
Go ahead, show me.
Grab him like this.
Right.
I take him like this.
Right. And you let it have it.
Yes.
Then what do you
I
do?
hold him like this.
Okay.
And he's spurting.
Right.
Spurting.
Okay, good.
Okay. And he's starting to sink down.
Okay, then what happens? You let him have it like that?
One more time.
Then what
He
happens?
goes down. He goes all the way down.
All the way down?
He's down on the ground.
Then what happens?
I'm leaning over him.
Right.
I take the knife.
Right.
Stab him like this.
Right.
One last time.
Right.
I pull it out.
And then what happens then?
He's dead. I stand up. Sit backing away. And here's Mother's voice.
You hear his mother's voice?
Here's Mother's voice.
Okay, why don't you sit down? What happens?
His mother's calling him.
What is she saying? Do you know?
Saying, Danny, are you in there? What are you doing in there, Danny?
Okay.
And I think, what am I going to do? I'm going to kill her. I have to kill her, you know. Should I wait for her to come in here and kill her in here? But I got this energy flow and I can't stand still. I can't. So I go out.
You get this rush.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have the knife in my hand and she's standing there. And she's looking at me. And at first there's fear, but I run towards her and I get right up next to her. And I look at her and I go, what's going on? And her eyes get big and get excited and happy. Her eyes get so happy.
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
But I just run. I don't kill her. I just run.
You ran?
Yeah.
Okay, where'd you run?
And she was in the bathroom and she comes out. I mean, she doesn't stay in there, you know, for a second. She just sees it and she comes out screaming.
Okay.
She's screaming and she's screaming. What she's screaming is, Dan, he's gone, he's gone. And she runs. She sees me and she's like, ah, ah. And she's running and I run parallel with her, like along the road. And she's like a little bit ahead of me and I'm running parallel with her and she's screaming.
Brandon incriminated himself the moment his interview started. He told the detective interviewing him that God told him to kill, but that he'd chosen Matthew by chance. The boy simply had the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He also mentioned that he saw 2 other people on his way out to the beach, but he decided against killing them because they were too impure. He recounted Matthew's death with a sort of callous disregard. He said he walked past Matthew's aunt into the public bathroom and then spotted Matthew standing there. He said he simply grabbed him and then carried out the attack. Brandon seemed to gain a strange sense of joy as he explained what had happened to the detective, and he even went as far as role-playing and correcting the man repeatedly, just to make sure they definitely got the full scope of what the murder had entailed. Every grisly detail. He still flip-flopped between facts though. At some point he claimed to have only jabbed Matthew once, but other times he said it was multiple times. He said, and I quote, "I just saw him standing there, and I wanted to drink his blood or something." Brandon spoke of vital fluids spurting, of seeing him down on the ground, and of hearing his mother's voice. As you'd expect, Brandon Wilson's case quickly proceeded to trial. The case of Brandon Wilson was one of the strangest and most disturbing cases that Judge John Einhorn had ever dealt with. Years later, Einhorn referred to the trial of Brandon Wilson as the most haunting case I've ever had. Brandon initially pleaded not guilty due to insanity, and his trial began on September 13th, 1999. He told the jury that he had ended Matthew's life because God told him to go on a killing spree.
Guilty.
I did it.
What's the time estimate for the preliminary hearing?
Your Honor, the time estimate is going to be, I'd say, 1 day. We need a time limit for the defendant.
I want to talk to myself. I did it. I killed him. I killed the little boy.
We request, Your Honor, that the defendant be removed from the courtroom at this time.
Well, no, he's not going to be removed. It's true. Don't say anything else at this point. Now, we're going to set this for a preliminary hearing December 18th, and that'll be at 8:30 in Department F. Now, Mr. Wilson, you have a right to a preliminary hearing within 10 court days of your arraignment and no later than 60 days of your arraignment. Do you agree to waive time so we can set this for preliminary hearing on December 18th?
Can I do it before that?
You need to give your attorney time to prepare your case.
I don't need an attorney.
Yes, you do. You're in a lot of trouble.
I know. I realize that. I accept it.
Okay. So your attorney is saying he needs that much time to prepare for you. So do you agree to waive time so we can set this for that date?
I want to do it as soon as possible.
Okay, Mr. Owen, apparently your client does not wish to enter a time waiver.
I understand that, Your Honor.
Knowing that, do you want it to be a no time waiver date, or do you still want this set for the 18th?
I want it set for the 18th, Your Honor, and I think the statements of the defendant indicate a very good reason why there is good cause why this matter ought to be continued until the 18th to allow me to prepare for that hearing.
We're going to set this. That's enough. That's enough. Mr. Rubin?
Perhaps we could set this in a demand time setting. Perhaps we could set it, if Mr. Owen wishes, we could set it for hearing between now and that demand time date, and we can further vet this issue or explore this issue.
I've not quite followed what you were saying, Dave.
If I may approach that.
No. We're going to set this. We're going to set this for December 18th at 8:30 in Department F. We're going to set this over the defendant's objection. This case is complicated enough that the amount of time necessary for Mr. Webb to prepare, he's going to have that amount of time. That's still a very reasonable time to have a preliminary hearing. Now, even though the defendant objects, his constitutional right to prepared counsel takes precedence over his statutory right to a preliminary hearing. And I'm going to find that right prevails, and so we are going to set this for the 18th. That's what it's going to be. All right.
Just for the record, we've provided to Mr. Owen the first 20 pages of discovery as well as a videotape today. The record should reflect that.
His public defender, Kurt Owen, painted him as an insane young adult who had heard voices, and he tried to tug on a jury's heartstrings by drawing on his tragic upbringing. According to Owens, Brandon first started experiencing the urge to end someone's life when he was a young teenager. At 13 years old, he was profoundly affected by his parents' divorce, and his anger manifested in a strong urge to end his mother's life. Owen later talked about how Brandon was changed by the death of his best friend. He had been, unfortunately, in a car when his friend had passed away. He was awarded a $25,000 settlement for the injuries he had sustained in this accident, and he used the money to travel the country and to find God. It was that fervor that drove him to substance abuse, and then eventually to murder. Any sympathy that the jury had felt for him evaporated when the prosecution showed them the interrogation tapes. Brandon was smiling and joking with the detectives, all whilst they interviewed him about the death of Matthew. His behaviour sealed his fate. The jury quickly found him guilty on September 28, 1999. Oddly, Brandon reacted to this verdict with a smile. Before the sentencing, he chose to testify, going against the advice of his counsel. And what he said surprised and terrified the court and jury. "I did it," he said. "I want to talk myself. I did it. I killed him. I killed the little boy." He told the court in a deliberate and calm voice that he felt no remorse in doing what he did to Matthew. "I would do it again in a second if I had the chance," he declared to the jurors, with Mother Sharon sitting just across from him. "Execute me," he begged. "You should do everything in your power to rid the world of me. Execute me. My whole purpose in life is to help destroy your society. You people are here as representatives of that society, and as such, you should do everything in your power to get rid of me." Unsurprisingly, after his declaration, Brandon got exactly what he wanted. The judge sentenced him to death row on November 4th, 1999, even after the pleas of mercy from his own lawyer. Judge Einhorn called Wilson beyond the pale of salvation. "Mr. Wilson, you have made real every parent's nightmare. By your twisted and selfish actions, you have taken from us our most precious asset, that is, our children." In a letter read by a friend of the family, Michael Lampf, Matthew's father told the court that Wilson had destroyed their happy family of 4. Because of his heinous act, he had become a robot. He'd endured divorce, cancer, and murder all in 1 year. He felt like an actor in a horror movie. Matthew's father passed away shortly after writing this letter. Mother Sharon also came to the courtroom with her scathing letter to Wilson. It read, "May he not relish in our pain. Let him see the face of a dying person every day and every night. And let that face be his own. This is what he wants. This is what the jury demanded. Let it be done." 13 years to the day, her words almost seem prophetic. In November 2011, Brandon was found deceased in his cell at San Quentin prison. This was just weeks before his execution. When they were interviewed about his passing, Gina Lampf, wife of Michael Lampf, said that his actions had destroyed many lives. Their families never really recovered from what he had done to sweet Matthew. They said he gave himself the justice that was coming. No one was sad to see Brandon Wilson go. Some of us, if we are lucky enough, will find true love in our lifetime. And if you do find it, you should cherish it and hold on to it with both hands. However, sometimes fate tears that one person away from you, leaving you to rebuild upon the ashes of what you believed was your perfect life. And whoever comes next has some big shoes to fill. You just have to hope their intentions are true. But what if they're not? And everything, and I mean everything, is about to be taken away from you in the worst possible way. Like many young couples, Corey and Kate Caston, who got married in 2006, were looking forward to a long future together. They had 2 children, a boy named Jonathan and a girl named Zoe. This made their family complete. But then the unthinkable sadly happened and Corey was diagnosed with cancer. Throughout his cancer battle, Corey kept an upbeat attitude, and Kate was there by his side to take care of him every step of the way. Despite the pain that he was experiencing as cancer invaded his lungs and bones, he once wrote a Facebook post about working through the discomfort he felt, so that he could put daughter Zoe's training wheels on her bicycle to give her a surprise. Unfortunately, Kate and Corey's love story did not have a happy ending. Corey fought cancer for 6 years before sadly passing away from the disease in April of 2017. He was just 43 years old. The loss of a wonderful husband and father like Corey left a big hole in the family. He was such a loving man who had a great relationship with his children and his wife. Jonathan and Zoe had been through a lot together. They had seen their father fight a vicious disease for most of their lives. Because of this bond and how close they were in age to each other, the brother and sister had an exceptionally close relationship. While Kate was totally heartbroken to lose her husband, she told a friend that Corey wanted her to continue living and to experience love again. Not long after Corey passed, Kate, who was an outgoing and friendly person, met a man at a concert. This man's name was Richard Emory. He and Kate soon started a relationship. Kate's friends and family were overjoyed to see some happiness coming her way once again. Everything appeared to be going well, and Emory seemed to be a good guy who never got angry or raised his voice at Kate. And he did seem to be a friendly person, but he could be insecure at times. This is arguably understandable for a man trying to fill the shoes of a greatly loved man like Corey, both a husband and a father. Kate and Emory had stable jobs. Kate was a salesperson who had been scaling back on her hours to spend more time with Zoe and Jonathan, and Emory was a truck driver. Richard Emory, who had been divorced twice, would often tell people that Kate was the love of his life, and he did seem to treat Kate and the 2 children well. He eventually moved in with Kate and her children in her home in St. Charles, a northwestern suburb of St. Louis in Missouri. Kate's father, Rick Mokel, who only lived a few minutes from Kate, frequently saw his grandkids and often saw Richard as well. Everyone appeared to be thriving despite the tragic loss of Corey. Zoe was showing promise as an athlete, and she was already involved with field hockey and she had plans to start playing lacrosse too. Jonathan enjoyed making people smile with his great sense of humour. Even though they'd been through a severe heartbreak and grief with their father passing away from cancer, they both appeared to enjoy having Richard Emory join into their household. He would help them with their homework at night and he seemed to treat them well. Kate's mother, Jane Mokel, who was divorced from Kate's father and had hip surgery in December of 2018, moved into Kate's house after this surgery. She planned to stay there until she had recovered from the operation. Everything now seemed to be going well for the whole family, and Kate had found the courage to move on and create a happy life for herself, a second chance after cancer had taken her first husband. But then, on December the 29th, 2018, a 911 call came in, and the caller was Jane Mokel. She had called from a downstairs room at Kate's house. There she was hiding with her 2 grandchildren. The dispatcher could hear gunshots during the call. Police were dispatched, but by the time they got there, the unthinkable had happened. Jane, who was now 61 years old, 8-year-old Zoe and 10-year-old Jonathan, all had their time on this earth ended by firearm. Kate was found in her bedroom upstairs with severe injuries. The 39-year-old mother was brought to the hospital, and there she sadly passed. As the police arrived at Kate's house for the 911 call, 46-year-old Richard Emory was spotted trying to flee the scene by driving away in his pickup truck. Police quickly released a description of Emory's vehicle, and then it was found just a couple of miles away. When the truck was stopped, police told Emory to get out of his vehicle. When he exited, he was holding a handgun and he started firing. Although one of his shots nearly hit a police officer, No officers were thankfully injured during this shootout. A police vehicle, however, was shot 8 times. Police returned fire and Richard Emory ran off into a wooded area, leaving his vehicle behind. After that, whilst on the run, Emory ended up trying to carjack a woman who was leaving a holiday party. The carjacking, however, was unsuccessful. He failed to take control of the car despite jabbing at the woman with a sharp implement. Although she was injured 7 times and initially was in a critical condition, the woman was luckily able to survive the ordeal and offered a description of Richard Emory to the police. For more than 7 hours, police searched for Richard Emory before finding him bleeding in a gas station bathroom just a few miles from Kate's house. The gas station clerk had called the police when he noticed Emory bleeding profusely and walking into the gas station bathroom. Emory's wounds had come from being shot during a gunfire exchange with the police. Projectiles struck him in both the hip and the neck. What could have led to these killings was a mystery. Kate's friends and family just never saw it coming. They said Richard Emory didn't display any behaviour that hinted towards violence at all. He had no criminal record, which made the shocking killings even more unexpected. While police officers were arresting Emory at the gas station, he strangely asked if the carjacking victim was okay. He now seemed to be showing some degree of concern for her well-being. He also later apologised for shooting at the officers. He asked if any police officers were struck by the bullets that he had fired. He did not, however, ask about Kate, her children, or her mother, and he wouldn't answer any of the investigators' questions about what happened at the house. When he was brought to the hospital to treat his wounds, Emory told police he had thrown out the gun and knife he had used while he was on the run. He gave the police the specific locations where he had ditched each one of the weapons, and the police were luckily able to find them. The community was reeling from the news of the murder. They held a vigil days after the tragedy occurred. Approximately 400 people attended because the family was so well loved.
Many people are still processing what happened, leaning on one another for support.
We need to be connected.
Dusty Geiger is a longtime family friend.
There was a lot of love there, big love.
She says the common thread that holds this family together is the mantra, big love.
That's a family phrase that they embodied.
Nancy Mokel, her daughter Kate Caston, and Kate's 2 kids, Jonathan and Zoe Caston, were memorialized by their pastor and close friends and family.
It's multi-generational, so there were friends and family of Jane and her daughter and families that got together with Kate and the kids.
Meanwhile, Richard Emory was charged with the crimes he committed that night, facing 15 counts, which included multiple counts of first-degree murder, attempted robbery, and assault. Due to the severity of the crimes, Emory was held by the authorities and was not allowed to post bond.
Steve, Richard Darren Emory remains locked up here at the St. Charles County Jail since his arrest around this time last year. His trial is not set for February 2021, seemingly a long ways away, but the family tells me tonight that they are trusting in the legal system to bring justice for their loved ones.
During Emory's trial, it was learned that he had been playing poker at a tavern and drinking on the night of the murders. When he got home, he and Kate got into a fight about Jonathan's Lego set, a Christmas present that Emory had bought for him. Kate told Emory that Jonathan's feelings were hurt because he had completed putting together the Lego set and wished that Richard had noticed when he had finished building it. While talking to Emory about Jonathan's hurt feelings, the fight between the couple continued to escalate. During the fight, Emory told the court that Kate slapped him on his face, and she then told him to leave her house. According to his account, the fight became more physical when he pushed Kate down and punched her. He said he didn't recall going to the safe located in his nightstand and then taking out his pistol, but he did. According to Emory's version of events, Kate and he struggled and the gun just went off. After shooting Kate, he went to the bedroom. There, Kate's mother had hidden with her grandchildren in an attempt to stay safe. But Emory kicked the door in. He then pulled the trigger on them all at point-blank range. When he left the scene, Emory carried with him an AR-15 rifle, along with 900 rounds. When he testified on the stand during his trial, Emory admitted to killing Kate, her mother, and her children. However, Emory said that he wasn't in control of himself on the night of the murders. He said it was as if he was watching the scene unfold through someone else's eyes, comparing it to feeling like he was stuck in a video game. During the trial, a psychologist that the defense had consulted said that Emory had borderline personality disorder. This psychologist said it was possible that Emory committed the murder in a dream state. This would be because he was upset that Kate had told him to leave. He may have also been upset about comparisons to her first husband because, in court, Emory testified that he told Kate during their argument that nothing he did was good enough, and that he couldn't do anything right in her eyes. His attorneys also tried to convince a jury that the violations and feelings of abandonment that he had experienced as a child that probably caused this disorder resulted in him snapping on the night of the murder. But Richard Emory had been twice divorced before, and neither of these breakups had a police report attached to them. Something now was very different. Prosecutors painted a different picture of the kind of man that Emory was. They established that he had a history of intimidation and violence when he was angry. Prosecutors discussed a golf game that happened in 2016. This was before Emory had even met Kate. At this game, another golfer was being loud and wouldn't quiet down when the other golfers asked him to. In retaliation, Emory rigged the man's golf cart so that his clubs fell off as he drove away. The man confronted Emory in a parking lot and struck him. He then aggressively approached Emory one more time. However, this time Emory took his pistol out of his truck and threatened to shoot the man. Later, he found out that the man simply wanted to apologize for striking him. During another incident with a co-worker, Emory got into a verbal fight and whipped out his pistol, and he did this just to show the person he was arguing with that he had a gun. Prosecutors said that Richard Emory's propensity for violence caused him to murder Kate and her family. According to their account of what had happened, on the night of the murders, Kate wanted to have a family night at home. She had asked Richard to stay home with the family for the night, but instead he went out to the bar to drink and to play poker. When he returned shortly after 11:30 p.m. that night, things quickly escalated out of control. They said after he murdered Kate, he would stop at nothing to escape punishment. They believed that he likely killed Kate's mother and her children, so that there would be no living witnesses to his crime. And then he jabbed his carjacking victim with a sharp implement in an attempt to evade capture. This added to the argument that Richard Emory was all about self-preservation. He just wanted to get away. Furthermore, the prosecutor struck back at the argument that Richard Emory didn't know what he was doing and was in a dream state, by noting that he didn't kill his dog, who was at home at the time of the murders. To the prosecution, this showed that his mind was working, and that he was capable of making logical decisions. Another key witness in the trial against Emory was the carjacking victim. The woman testified during his trial that she was headed to her car after leaving a family holiday party when she saw a man coming toward her. She got into her car quickly but couldn't manage to lock the door in time before Emory reached her vehicle. He opened the door and started jabbing at her. She was struck 5 times in the chest. In order to alert anyone nearby that she was in trouble, she tried to hit the car horn. The panic button on her keys went off instead, causing Emory to run off. The woman luckily managed to get back inside the house that she had just left, and was then able to get the medical help that she needed. A very fortunate escape. Richard Emory's trial lasted so horrific that jurors recommended Emory receive the death penalty, and the judge affirmed this in 2022, sentencing Emory to die for his crimes. Our love and respect goes out to all those that knew and loved April, and all those affected by today's dark case. April Milsap was born on January 2nd, 2000 in Wise County, Virginia. She was born to her mother Jennifer Milsap and her father Bobby. April grew up in the small town of Armada, which is about 1 hour north of Detroit. April attended school at Krause Elementary, and everybody who knew her described her as friendly, as compassionate and intelligent. She loved writing short stories, poetry, and she had a love of animals. Sometime during April's early life, her mother Jennifer, a woman who had a speech impediment, remarried. April's stepfather was David Lichtenfeld, a man who doted after April like she was his own daughter. There were dozens of pictures of the two of them sharing tender moments. These spanned throughout her young and early teenage years. David also taught April how to fight. At 14 years old, April Milsap was looking forward to the rest of her life. She had just wrapped up middle school, and she was now preparing to start at Armada High School in the fall of 2014. At this age, she now had a boyfriend. She had an affectionate dog named Penny, and she was surrounded by friends and family who knew and loved her dearly. Armada, Michigan is a small town with under 2,000 people. It was a type of place where everybody knew everybody. The Armada police force comprised of an elderly chief, a man named Howard Smith, and his deputy. Just 10 or so part-time deputies supplemented the active duty officers, but on most days, the sleepy town didn't need it. The only crimes that ever happened in Armada were the occasional theft or some illicit substance use. Most Armada citizens felt safe leaving their doors unlocked at night. Armada was the type of small town that you moved to when you wanted to start a family. But after Thursday, April the 24th, 2014, all of that changed. April sat down to a crunch salad lunch and received an affectionate back rub from her stepfather. This was before he headed out the door for his night job. They exchanged goodbyes as he left, and at around 5:30 p.m. she went for an evening stroll with her dog, Penny. They walked along the Macomb Orchard Trail, a popular hiking trail in Armada. As they walked, they enjoyed each other's company as they always did, before a man on a motorcycle rode up to them. "I think I almost got kidnapped, OMFG. April frantically texted her boyfriend after encountering a mysterious man on the Orchard Trail. He had ridden up to her on his blue and white motorcycle and wore a helmet. The man tried propositioning April, but she rebuffed him and doubled back the way she'd come. A man on a walk with his two young daughters witnessed the entire exchange. But even with their presence, April did not feel safe. She sent a text message to her boyfriend at around 6:30 p.m. Here she shared what had happened. However, April didn't get a reply from him before tragedy struck. The mysterious man found April once again, but this time he refused to take no for an answer. He snuck up on her and swung at her head with his motorcycle helmet. This attack understandably floored April. She hadn't seen it coming. Then he dragged her off the path and ripped off her clothes. He attempted to take her, but April fought back. When April's resistance proved too much, he struck her with his motorcycle helmet, then shoved her to the dirt and stomped on her neck. He didn't let up his foot until April had permanently stopped breathing. Devoted dog Penny, who'd found April's body, bolted away down the trail. When April did not return home that evening, Jennifer Milsap texted her daughter to find out where she was. After 3 to 4 unanswered texts, she called her phone. However, it now went to voicemail. The mother grew increasingly concerned. She called the only person who might know where April was, her boyfriend. He hadn't seen her, but revealed helpful information that alarmed Jennifer more than anything else. He'd received that text message from April, the one that said, "I think I almost got kidnapped." Jennifer called stepfather David, sobbing and telling him that April was missing. David left work immediately and rushed home to Jennifer. They hopped into the car and went into town searching for their daughter. After hours of failing to find April, they called the Armada police and told them that April was missing. After word spread that April was now missing, thousands of tips began to flow in. One was from the father who'd seen the strange motorcyclist talking with April. The police immediately began to investigate this mystery man. But before they could find him, a 911 call came in. At 8:30 p.m, a couple came across Penny at the intersection of Fulton and Depot Street. At first, they thought he was a stray, but on their way back from their walk, they heard Penny whimper and whine, and it occurred to them that she might be trying to tell them something. So they followed Penny, and it led them deep into the woods. There they found clothing scattered around. At first, they thought it was just trash, but then they saw her. April lay on the ground with most of her clothes removed. She had a deep shoe print on her neck. They weren't able to tell her age or identity because they refused to get closer to the body. This is that 911 call.
911?
Yeah, I'm fairly certain we just found a body along the mountain bike trail.
Okay, where are you at?
We are between Olmo and North Avenue. It's in Armada. There's a subdivision. You know the name of the street from the subdivision? It's by the new construction. Kind of.
Okay.
If you guys come down to Olmo and stop at the bike trail and head back west, I can meet with somebody there.
Okay, so you're going to meet where it crosses Olmo?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like GPS is putting you a lot closer to Fulton Street, which is
I can meet you guys at Fulton as well. We're kind of right in the middle. Or if you take if you take 4 until it ends at the water department, I can meet you over there.
okay. What hold on a second. Is it a male or a female?
Female.
About how old do you think she is?
I didn't get that close.
Okay. Is she on the trail?
No, she's off of the trail, touched back in the woods. Her clothes are all taken off.
Okay, and you don't believe she's breathing?
I don't believe so, no.
What's your last name?
S-A-D.
Yeah, please. First name? Okay. You're going to meet them at Fulton, right?
Floral would be closer. For County Park right at the...
Floral?
Yep. Floral and Depot. They've got...
Okay. Okay, we'll have them meet you at Floral and Depot.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, bye.
In mere minutes, the news quickly spread around the town that the body had been found on the Orchard Trail. Upon hearing the news, Jennifer attended the scene. All the way there, she hoped it wasn't April, but she was heartbroken on arrival.
Love your kids. Never take for granted anything. Tell your kids you love them.
Barely believing what has happened in their small town.
Just pray. That's all I can say is pray.
The village of Armada, stunned to learn the young girl found dead Thursday evening along Macomb Orchard Trail, was one of their own. 14-year-old April Milsap murdered.
To find out someone would do this is just unbelievable. I can't understand it.
Stuff like this happens, but you never expect it to happen like near where you live.
Police say Milsap left her Armada home just after 5 Thursday afternoon to walk the trail with her dog, something she did every day.
Normally she's out for about 35 to 45 minutes with the dog. She was out for about an hour and a half. The mother became alarmed.
During a mother's panic, joggers noticing a border collie running in and out of a wooded area along the trail.
When April Milsap's body was found, her beloved dog Penny was still there guarding her, the only known witness to a horrific murder.
Penny loved April. Whenever April came out of her room in the morning, she was there.
Upon examination, the coroner's office stated that she died of asphyxia. This was from her windpipe being crushed. As well as this, the blunt force trauma caused by the helmet left an indentation on her skin post-mortem. Police ruled April's death as murder. the first in Armada in 40 years. Michigan State Police and the FBI were called in to help Armada's small police department. Police ransacked the crime scene, bagging shoes, clothes, hair, and every stray piece of evidence. There were 188 exhibits when they were done, but none of them had the DNA, fingerprints, hair, fibers, or fluids of the killer. Oddly though, April's phone and bag were not found at her location, but some distance away.
As detectives continue to investigate tips and leads into who killed 14-year-old April Milsap, we're getting a clearer picture of what kind of person she was. We're told she was a young woman of faith who was kind to all around her, and that's making her death more difficult for loved ones to understand. The chorus of voices lifting up song and prayer, proof that a beloved teenager left a lasting impression in this community.
April was the kindest girl anyone could meet. She was friends with everyone, and she had a wonderful and beautiful personality.
More than 200 people gathered at St. Mary Mystical Rose Church in Armada to remember 14-year-old April Milsap. Her body discovered by joggers Thursday night near the trail April knew so well. The shock of the news still fresh several days later.
To be here and be strong for the kids of this parish, it's a difficult day for all of us.
April's school friends hang on to their best memories.
Her smile. She had a gorgeous smile. She was a gorgeous young lady. Even on her bad days, she would try to make everyone else around here feel better. And, you know, that's one of the things I'll never forget about her.
As family members hope and pray for clues of who killed April and why. April's grandfather in Florida tells 7 Action News he doesn't think April was a random target.
It would help us find the culprit, and we certainly kind of feel like it's somebody that she knew.
Police are still searching for 2 men spotted in this gray box van that was seen circling the area April's body was found.
The police turned their attention back to the person of interest, the man spotted by the father of 2. They switched their focus, looking for new leads. However, at this time, nothing new came in. They had the witness who'd spotted the mystery man sit down with an artist. Together, they created a composite sketch which they released to the public. The Evening News declared the mystery man a person of interest and potentially the last person who'd seen April alive. They had already ruled out the family, the boyfriend, and anybody else who'd seen April that day. All they had left was the man on the motorbike. And it wouldn't take long for them to find out exactly who it was. An officer spotted a motorcycle that matched the witness's description. They traced it to a nearby township called Wales. It was the home of a father and son, James Van Calitz Sr. and James Van Calitz Jr. James Sr. was a registered offender, but this time the police were not there for him. Instead, they were there for his 33-year-old son, James Jr. James's facial features were a strong match for the sketch that had been compiled. They attempted to contact James to bring him in for questioning, but he was unresponsive, giving them probable cause for a warrant. On July the 30th, they stormed James's house looking for evidence to tie him to April's murder, but they find no evidence directly connecting him to April. What the police did find, though, was illicit substances. Therefore, they arrested James Jr. for possession, but they did not doubt he was also responsible for April's demise. All they had to do now was prove it. The evidence they were looking for came from an unusual but all the same reliable source. It was April's phone. She had a fitness app on since the moment she left the house. It tracked her location and the steps that she covered. When they overlaid it with the precise location data from Google Earth, FBI agents were able to recreate the last 63 minutes of her life. The data showed that she had left the house. She travelled 3.6 miles an hour, and she headed to the trail. She completed her walk and was returning to town when she must have encountered Van Calitz. Shortly after, at around 6:28, she sent the message to her boyfriend. Moments after the text, her steps formed several zigzag patterns. The police assumed this was signs of the struggle.
An FBI investigator who examined April Milsap's phone was able to pinpoint every step of her final 63 minutes for the jury. Data from a workout app shows her traveling at about 3.6 miles an hour through town. Then the Orchard Trail. Just before doubling back, the track zigzags in a circular fashion.
Then there were 3 outgoing calls at 6:21, 6:22 and 6:23. The location of these calls was where April's body was found. She tried to call for help in her final moments. If it were not for the next actions that Van Callis took, they might have never connected him to April's murder. Shortly after her demise, her cell phone started moving at over 13 miles per hour before abruptly stopping. They found April's phone where the app stopped, and they combed through CCTV in the direction that the motorcycle was heading. They found Van Callis at a gas station not far from the location where April's cell phone had pinged, and with that, the police had him. That was what clinched it for me, Police Head Smith said. It was enough information to go to trial, and the people of Armada rejoiced at the news. The town adored April. They all stood in solidarity, mourning her passing. They erected shrines, wore pink clothes, and tied bows. Pink was April's favourite colour, after all. Van Callis was also no hero to the people of Armada. He was popular with the criminal elements of the town, and had been previously charged with robbery, along with the refusal to pay child support in 2005 and 2006. After a preliminary hearing, James Van Callis Jr. was charged with a long list of crimes. This included first-degree murder for the death of April. His trial began in early March after being denied bail. This was due to his prior illicit substance charge and extensive history with the courts. And despite the prosecution being sure of themselves, they had a hard time proving James Van Callis had killed April. After all, there was no DNA evidence connecting him to the scene of the crime. This was a fact that the prosecution hammered on again and again. His attorney, Azar Sheikh, cast doubt on whether James was even at the location at all. The police found no tyre tracks or tread prints except the one on April's neck, a mark allegedly caused by a shoe. Just as it was beginning to look like James could walk away unpunished, the prosecution called a surprise witness that turned James's defense upside down. This witness was his ex-girlfriend. She had some interesting things to say about the night that April Milsap died. Crystal Stadler was living with Van Callis around the time that April was killed. She said that Van Callis was out of the house during the window that the police estimated the murder occurred, and when he returned home later that night, he was acting weird. She woke up in the middle of the night to see him cleaning his shoes with disinfectant. She thought this was strange since her boyfriend never washed his shoes, and this wasn't really something you do in the middle of the night. When Van Callis Jr. climbed back into bed, he told Crystal that he'd messed up and needed her to stay by his side.
Does he say anything to you when he comes back to bed?
Yeah, that he messed up and he needed me to stand by his side.
Stadler's testimony gets worse for Van Callis, saying he asked her to wash his clothes, something that never happened, and...
Did you find something unusual in the Carhartt jacket after you washed it?
Yeah.
What was it that you found?
Like wadded up hair and like shavings of grass or like hay.
Hair that she says belonged to a person, not an animal. And then Stadler says Van Callis asked everybody in the house to lie about what kind of shoes he had on the day the young girl was killed.
What was he telling to everybody in the house?
To tell him that he was wearing K-Swiss shoes.
Was he wearing K-Swiss shoes that night?
No.
The shoe model that he'd been cleaning up had a tread. This tread matched up closely to the marks left on April's body. While the particular shoe was not found in Van Callis's home during their search, the prosecution proved that he had those particular brand of shoes by showing a video Van Callis Jr. had recorded on his cell phone earlier on that year. Things got much worse for Van Callis when his partner discussed what he asked her to do next. James asked her to wash his clothes, which, according to Crystal, never happened. But she did agree to carry out the task. However, before doing so, she went through the trousers and found clumps of human hair and grass shavings. James Van Callis Jr. was found guilty by the jury. However, he didn't give up the fight. He said the following in his closing statement: "There is no evidence that shows that I did anything wrong. There's nobody that can identify that my motorcycle was on the trail that day. None of the witnesses could positively identify me. They said they saw eyes. How many people have eyes that are that shape? This is a sad chain of events that I'm somehow wrapped up in. I don't know her. I've never met her. April's mother also had the opportunity to confront James. She rounded her speech off with a strong phrase. I pity you, and I hate you, and I can never forgive you. On March the 30th, 2016, James Van Callis Jr. was sentenced to life without parole, something which was met with jubilation, cheers and claps of April's friends and family. Over 200 people gathered at St. Mary Mystical Rose Church to say a final goodbye to April after the trial was finally over.
I just know that some guy come here,
yeah,
and then he up some guy. I don't know what happened.
Right.
I don't know what happened.
In the peaceful town of Chelmsford, England, Adrian Ellingford, a 44-year-old family man, lived with his wife Laura and their two young boys aged 10 and 12. Known for his friendly and positive nature, Adrian was considered very kind, always eager to lend a hand to friends and neighbours in need. Everything seemed to be going okay in Adrian's life right up until the night of July the 25th, 2022. At around 4:30 a.m, Essex police received a 999 call made by a concerned woman at a residence on Nelson Grove. The woman recounted that an unknown assailant had broken into their home, which left a guest critically wounded with a sharp implement lodged in his back. The house guest was trying to investigate what was going on after being told by the woman's daughter that someone was in the house. He then fell victim to this intruder. An intruder who fled the scene before the gravity of the situation was fully realised. Adrian Ellingford was identified as the victim by the Essex police upon their arrival at the scene. Though he was not declared dead on arrival, paramedics tried their best to stabilise his critical condition. However, despite all of their hard work, Adrian's injuries proved too severe and he eventually took his last breath. As the news of Adrian's identity surfaced in the media, his family, overwhelmed by grief, issued a heartrending statement expressing the shattering of their hearts and pleading for privacy during that time. Meanwhile, the police appealed to the public for any potential footage of the incident. They urged homeowners with surveillance cameras facing the street to come forwards, asking them to share any relevant recordings. They also sought information from neighbours who might have observed any suspicious activities, anything between the time spans of 11 p.m. and 4:30 a.m. on that fateful night. The home where Adrian Ellingford was discovered and the site of the crime belonged to a woman named Stephanie Bream. She shared the residence with her mother, Mary McNamara. Adrian was found within their home, and his connection to these women, why he was there, and the identity of the assailant remained unclear. Then the Exodus and Kent Serious Crimes Detectorate took charge of the investigation into Adrian's demise. Detective Chief Inspector Louis Metcalf disclosed that, upon the declaration of a murder investigation, their team initiated an exhaustive process, gathering CCTV footage, witness statements, and any other available evidence. Investigators canvassed the neighbourhood, going door to door to ask about any observations or information. He emphasised the devastating nature of the incident, highlighting that it deprived two children of their father and deeply shocked a community. To reassure the residents, the police bolstered their presence in the area, trying to restore a sense of security to the shaken neighbourhood of Nelson Grove. At 7:40 a.m, officers noticed a man acting suspiciously near the cordoned-off area. What made this encounter even more bizarre was the fact that, at that time, news hadn't yet broken about the murder, leaving the neighbourhood unaware of the news or the police presence. This man, allegedly drunk and holding a bottle of brandy, approached an officer guarding the scene, claiming to have information about the incident. Information that no one else in the area could have had at that point. His behaviour quickly escalated into an argument which later led to his arrest. An arrest made only on suspicion of being drunk and disorderly, unaware that the police had caught the actual perpetrator. It wasn't until the release of the body cam footage from the officer that the authorities realised the depths of this man's involvement in the murder.
Who are you looking for?
I'm looking for a I can help her. What's going on?
Uniform one night?
Yeah, I can help her. What's going on? Yeah. No, I know what happened. I know the people they involved. So.
Go again.
Yeah. But we need to dig deep, you know.
Thank you. What's your name?
I'm not gonna tell you my name. I don't give a because I know what happened, and you need me to know, figure it out what happened. If you don't have me, you don't know what happened.
I'm looking
I just
for
know that some guy come here.
Yeah.
And then he up some guy. I don't know
What?
happened.
Right.
I don't know what happened. He just got. You're gonna think about me, but it's not gonna be me because you have no proof.
So you think something's happened to a male in this address?
No, I know what happened.
What
I know
happened then?
everything.
Tell me
I know
what
everything.
happened.
This city is mine. I'm not gonna
This
tell you
city's
what
yours, is it?
happened. Yeah, this city is mine.
Can you get in the van, please? You've been arrested, okay? We're trying
I've been arrested,
we're
yeah, so
trying,
send me the law.
We're trying not.
Okay,
we're
send me.
trying not to manhandle you, but we need you to get in the van.
Days later, on July the 28th, 2022, the man was formally charged with the murder of Adrian Ellingford. Marrick Hecko, a 26-year-old man from Slovakia, was the unexpected perpetrator behind the tragic murder of Adrian Ellingford in Chelmsford, England. Having arrived in the UK 3 years prior to 2019, Hecko had been employed as both a waiter and a chef at local restaurants. The connection between Marrick Hecko, Adrian Ellingford, and Stephanie Bryan was a complicated one. Hecko's past romantic involvement with Stephanie Bryan ended in a breakup in May of 2022. This sparked a continuous and troubling pattern of stalking and obsession towards his ex-girlfriend. Following the breakup, Hecko's obsession with Stephanie got even worse. He would stalk her pretty continuously. He would search her name online. He would send unsolicited messages, photos and videos, and even show up at her house uninvited. The prosecution portrayed Hecko's infatuation with Stephanie as an ongoing fixation that he just couldn't let go of. Surprisingly, the involvement of Adrian Ellingford, a married father of two, became a part of this complex scenario. It all started when Adrian and Stephanie were getting into a secret romantic relationship. This affair led to Adrian visiting Stephanie's home on occasions when Marrick would show up unannounced. This escalated the already tense situation created by Hecko's obsessive behaviour. The overlap between these relationships was the main reason why the tensions escalated even more. Despite being questioned multiple times by the police in the aftermath of the murder, Hecko repeatedly chose to remain silent, invoking his right to do so. However, the body cam footage from the crime scene captured Hecko's intoxicated state, along with his incriminating statements. As the trial commenced on February 13, 2023, at Chelmsford Crown Court, Hecko maintained a plea of not guilty. Nonetheless, the jury was presented with the compelling evidence captured in the body cam footage. The recording revealed Hecko's drunken approach to the officer guarding the crime scene. In a slurred state, Hecko boasted about having crucial information related to the incident, saying that without his help, the police would be unable to solve the case. He made ambiguous but incriminating statements claiming knowledge of the event, all whilst expressing a sense of control over the city. He made remarks such as, "The city is mine." The video concluded with Hecko's arrest. It displayed his physical resistance as officers tried to detain him. The prosecutor's case against Hecko presented a narrative that seemingly aligned with the evidence and witness statements. He claimed that he visited the crime scene only after learning about the incident from the news, although this conflicted with the actual timeline of events. Witnesses had reportedly heard him admit to doing something terrible, which put the spotlight on him even more. Essex police discovered a sharp utensil, one that was believed to be part of the murder weapon at the crime scene. Testing confirmed that the DNA on the knife handle did match Hecko's, At that point, it was very clear that Hecko was the one responsible for Adrian Ellingford's demise. Additionally, CCTV footage captured Hecko purchasing 2 bottles of brandy. He was seen at the store shortly before the murder occurred. One of these bottles found in the crime scene also had Hecko's fingerprints on it. However, the defense highlighted the possibility of an alternative explanation for the DNA found on the implement's handle, by proposing that forensic evidence might have not exclusively pointed to Hecko as the perpetrator. They suggested that investigators looked at why Adrian was at the house that night, which might lead to the revelation of a potential motive. The prosecution then presented their narrative of the night of the murder, suggesting that Marrick Hecko, in a fit of jealousy upon seeing Adrian's car parked at Stephanie's house, impulsively trespassed into the home. Allegedly, he found his ex-girlfriend Stephanie and Adrian asleep together. This then resulted in a violent assault on Adrian before fleeing the scene. The prosecution portrayed a sequence of events where Adrian, feeling the presence of a stranger in the house, woke up but unaware of the extent of his injuries, attempted to check, only to then succumb to his wounds and collapse. According to the prosecution's theory, the assailant later returned to the scene in an intoxicated state, purportedly to boast about his actions to the police, believing he had eluded capture. Throughout the trial, Marrick Hecko firmly maintained his innocence and tried to refute the claims made against him. He continued to deny any involvement, claiming that he was not present at Stephanie's home on that fateful evening, proposing his lack of knowledge regarding the open patio door, as well as his alleged absence from the address in question. The defense introduced a twist by discovering the reason for Adrian's presence in Stephanie's home that night. This allowed them to discover a potential motive, challenging the straightforward narrative of Hecko's guilt. However, forensic scientists suggested that while Hecko's DNA on the implement handle did point to his involvement, there might be an alternative explanation. During the sentencing of Marrick Hecko, Judge Christopher Morgan highlighted the intense jealousy and suspicion that Hecko harbored towards Stephanie, emphasizing that only he knew the exact circumstances leading up to this fatal attack. Judge Morgan emphasized the brutal nature of the crime, and he said that Adrian was subjected to 2 forceful and deep penetrating piercings to the chest. At the sentencing, Adrian Ellingford's wife, Laura, read a victim impact statement. It expressed the profound loss and devastation inflicted upon their family by the untimely demise of her husband, a devoted father of 17 years. He said that the family was extremely heartbroken, and they were unable to comprehend the circumstances of Adrian's terrible, tragic departure. Adrian's dedication to his 2 boys aged 10 and 12 was evident in his volunteer work with the local Boy Scout group, a testament to his nurturing and caring nature. At the end of the day, the jury wasted no time in reaching a guilty verdict. They took less than 1 day to deliberate. Despite Hecko's seemingly emotionless demeanor in court, the severity of his actions led to a significant sentence. He was handed a minimum prison term of 26 years, with credit given for the time he had already served, signifying the gravity of his culpability in this heart-wrenching and senseless murder of Adrian Ellingford. Detective Chief Inspector Louise Metcalf expressed the tragic loss and impact of Adrian Ellingford's senseless attack. She highlighted the void left in the lives of his 2 children, now deprived of a father. In her moving statement, Laura painted a heart-rending picture of the man that he was, describing him as an amazing husband, a loving son, a caring brother, a friend to many, and above all, a remarkable father. Laura herself showed incredible strength and empathy despite the heart-wrenching situation, the loss of her husband and the mystery surrounding his death, including this possible secret relationship, must have been incredibly difficult for her to handle. However, her main focus remained on her sons and seeking justice for Adrian, putting their needs above her own possible anger or confusion. The most heart-wrenching aspect, Laura said, was the impact that this had on their innocent sons, having to break the devastating news to them, knowing they wouldn't have their father by their side for life's biggest moments. This was an unbearable and heartbreaking task for her to carry out. The absence of their father through life's milestones, such as learning to drive, Celebrating achievements and witnessing their growth into adulthood stands as an irreplaceable loss. The sentencing of Marrick Hecko to life in prison did bring closure in the form of justice, yet the lack of emotion displayed by him throughout the trial added to the severity of the situation.
What it is, my son's friend is staying with us. This morning I tried to wake both of them up, but the girl didn't wake up. We tried to wake her up, I don't know what it is.
I need you to pull back the duvet for me and just look to see if you can see any signs of breathing.
I tried to hold the pulse.
No, I need you to put your face next to her mouth. Can you feel any breath? Can you see her chest going up and down?
No.
Emily Longley was born on the 15th of July 1993 in England. She was born to Caroline and John Longley. However, Emily grew up in Auckland after the family moved to New Zealand when she was just 10 years old. But in 2010, Emily seemed to fall in with what was described as the wrong crowd. Everyone decided it was best that she return to the UK to finish her studies. So that is exactly what she did. She then lived with her paternal grandparents Ronald and Zosha Longley. So upon her return to the UK, she lived in Southbourne near Bournemouth. She was an aspiring model with big ambitions and even signed to a local modelling agency. Now getting back to being a focused teenager, Emily took a course in business studies at Brockenhurst College in Hampshire. As well as this, she also worked part-time at the clothing chain Topshop. Emily was described as an outgoing, intelligent and vibrant young woman. She was very, very loved by a lot of people. Bournemouth boasts 7 glorious miles of pretty idyllic coastline. This makes it a pretty popular holiday destination in the UK. For many, it's a place to create lasting memories. Its seaside resorts come alive fully in the summer sun. Hopefully, this is the UK. But the sun isn't always needed to enjoy the lovely beaches, cafes and walks that the area has to offer. A weird fact about Bournemouth is that the Beatles loved the place and they played there regularly in their early career. Sadly though, just like any other town, lurking amongst its upstanding citizens are dark characters that cannot be illuminated by even the sunniest of days. Emily met a man named Elliot Turner in December of 2010. She was 17 and he was 20 years old. Elliot was a well-known figure in the local bar and club scenes in the Poole and Bournemouth areas. He was a member of something called The Firm. They were a gang of young men who mainly just had daddy money and no responsibility. But I'm not bitter. He was the son of a millionaire after all, so it was only befitting. His father, Lee Turner, was a jeweller, and he had made a fortune for himself from the work. Elliot's friends knew him as All Talk Turner, so I think we are building a pretty strong picture of the kind of man that Elliot was. Elliot Turner could not stop bragging. When he was with his friends, he boasted a lot, almost constantly. Shortly after meeting, Emily and Elliot seemed to get along very well. They both went on a double date after Emily returned to England, on her quest to better herself and become a successful young adult. However, the relationship was turbulent and on-off. They enjoyed the high life together and often stayed out late into the night and the early hours. They would be partying, drinking, and living their version of glitz and glamour. However, Elliot was historically obsessed with women. He was jealous and he couldn't hide it. It was said that Elliot could be threatening, aggressive, violent, controlling and possessive towards Emily. All of these things were not the making of a gentleman, no matter how big their trust fund. Just a few months into their relationship, Emily wrote Elliot a letter of sorts. Its contents were somewhat concerning. On a piece of paper, Emily wrote a short list. Number 1, I love you. Number 2, don't say you'll kill me. Number 3, stop talking about your ex-girlfriends. Number 4, stop being so constantly aggressive. Be more cool because that is so much hotter. And you make me scared because you're so intimidating. Now the dark picture of this relationship was being brought into sharper focus. Emily was frustrated, hurt, and scared. However, the relationship did not break up, but instead broke down in the worst way imaginable. At the start of May, Emily had gone on Facebook to state that she had a stalker. Emily also posted, "Someone just called me," and I was like, "Who's this?" And they were like, "You don't know me, but I know everything about you." And I was like, "How did you get my number?" And he was like, "I'll tell you when I see you," and kept asking me out. So I hung up and I won't stop calling. I'm really scared. It's a private number as well. Some people just need to get a life. On Thursday the 4th of May, Emily posted that she was down and out. Meanwhile, Emily had sent a text message to her mother about Elliot's controlling behaviour. She now confessed that she had considered breaking up with him. The message read, "I'm thinking of breaking up from Elliot because of his controlling, threatening behaviour." This is pretty damning and pretty scary. It is hard to imagine how Mother Caroline must have felt on the other side of the world, knowing her daughter was scared and quite possibly in danger. On the night of May the 6th, throughout the night, CCTV footage shows that the couple are not very close. Earlier on in the day, Elliot had hacked into Emily's social media. Whilst prying in her private life, he discovered a message from another man, a man that was offering to buy Emily a drink if he saw her out that night. Elliot was enraged by this message. Over the course of a night in one of the bars, Elliot saw the man from Emily's DMs, and from somewhere he obtained a lump hammer. And then he threatened the man with it. He warned him off of Emily and threatened to take his life if he didn't comply. Things between Emily and Elliot were not going well at all, and at some point in the night, Emily threw a drink over Elliot, and we can imagine how this went down. The distance between the couple is increasingly obvious as they move from club to club. Emily and Elliot had an argument over her outfit choice. It didn't end well as Emily, against her will, agreed to go back to Elliot's house in the Queen's Park area to talk things over. Emily was back at Elliot's house. A conversation took place, but we will never know its true contents. All we know is that it happened in Elliot's room, and it would be Emily's last.
Just tell me what's happened there, the main reason for the call.
My son's friend is staying with us. This morning, I tried to wake both of them up, but the girl didn't wake up. We tried to wake her up. I don't know what it is.
Right, now, is she breathing?
No, I don't think so.
Right, how old is she?
She's 17.
I need you to pull back the duvet for me and just look to see if you can see any signs of breathing.
I tried to hold the pulse.
No, I need you to put your face next to her mouth. Can you feel any breath? Can you see her chest going up and down?
No.
Nothing. What colour is she?
What colour is she?
Yeah, what colour is she? Is she blue? Is she red?
Is she red? My husband is having a look now. Hang on.
Got anything round her neck?
Anything around her neck? Oh, that necklace. No, she's got a necklace very tight.
Very tight round her neck?
Yeah.
Can you get that necklace off?
Okay.
How tight?
Very, very tight. The ambulance is here.
I need you to open the front door and get that necklace from around her neck off.
Okay.
Now, do it now.
Emily's body was found on the morning of May the 7th, 2011. When police attended the scene, Anita Turner, the 51-year-old mother of Elliot, said that Emily had died in her sleep whilst at her house. An inquest was opened into her death, and later adjourned by the Bournemouth, Poole and East Dorset coroner. The cause of death at that point was undetermined and subject to toxicology tests. Two men from Bournemouth, aged 19 and 17 respectively, were arrested concerning the passing of Emily. However, they were released on police bail pending further inquiries. Emily's father believed that his daughter had probably died in her sleep, but the cause of her death at this time remained a mystery. He claimed it was a huge shock to both parents, and they were surely going to take a trip from New Zealand to England on a quest to discover what had happened to their beloved Emily. She was a beautiful girl and full of life. It's so tragic, Father John told the New Zealand Herald. With the text messages sent to Emily's mother and her strange Facebook status updates, exactly what had happened couldn't quite be pieced together, but suspicions were growing. Anita Turner's claims that Emily had simply passed away in her son's bed only made the police officers more suspicious. They then made their decision to bug the household. Now they simply awaited the family to slip up and share more than they would do openly. Obviously unaware of the surveillance the police had put in place, the couple unwittingly gave the evidence that police needed to confirm what they already suspected. They played straight into the hands of the law. Elliot's father Lee, as we know, is a jeweller, and his mother Anita was a healthcare assistant. Anita used bleach to destroy a confession note that her boy had written after he killed Emily. Elliot confessed to his mother what he had done to Emily, whilst held up in their £350,000 mini mansion. The police bug recorded the parents' conversations after they destroyed the note. This is the real audio from that house. I'll warn you, it's pretty crazy to listen to.
You were right to destroy them. You think we were right to destroy them?
Yeah.
Because we've perverted the course of justice. We've destroyed vital evidence in this case. You think we were right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mum, but focus the conversation because it looks. You look so guilty. You look so guilty by ringing the father.
No, I didn't.
But Mum, please, from a policeman's point of view, it's so obvious. That girl is. Well, I've been meeting that girl has ruined my life.
Yeah,
she has ruined my life.
She did ruin your life.
I would have known she was freezing, Mum. You can't be. You gotta think. Brain. Just thought she was, I don't know, I thought she was just knackered. Just really tired. This has happened before when I can't get her out of bed. Hence, officer, I made a cup of tea. First, because I thought she was okay. Mum, that's fine, it's so believable.
It's burning me inside. Every second of my day it's burning. But I know something that they don't know. It's burning me. Eating me up.
I just grabbed it and I grabbed it as hard as I could and I grabbed it like that.
The police had what they needed to take the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, and Elliot, Lee and Anita were all arrested surrounding the death of Emily Longley. In April of 2012, almost a year after Emily met her untimely end, Elliot's trial began. Elliot Turner informed the jury that he had a short and fiery relationship with Emily. The prosecution said that Emily Longley was killed in a jealous rage, all whilst in the Turners' family home. They added that Turner had a history of obsession with women, and believed that Emily was seeing someone else other than him. His parents helped him cover the crime. They helped him destroy his confession letter. This was a vital piece of evidence in the case to bring justice to Emily and Emily's family, and they took that away. The jury has heard how Elliot Turner was aggressive, controlling and manipulative towards Emily. It was Elliot Turner's jealousy and anger that led him to kill Emily. It has been our case throughout that Elliot Turner has failed at any stage to show remorse, and that he knew exactly what he was doing. When he was cross-examined, Elliot said he only defended himself when Emily attacked him. He said it was an argument in his bedroom that turned violent. He said that he grabbed the deceased by the neck for 5 to 6 seconds. He then pressed down on Emily as she lay on the bed to stop her from attacking him. He said when he woke the next morning, he found Emily's lifeless body in the bed beside him. However, it was revealed through the trial that Elliot had strangled Emily as he was overtaken with jealous rage. He left her dead body in his bed at Queenswood Avenue, Bournemouth. The only motive that he had was that he believed he could get away with it. Elliot had boasted to his friends that he would do it, and then come out of jail as a millionaire. On the night that he put his hands around Emily's neck, it appeared that he had seen his girlfriend, an aspiring model, in a picture with 2 topless men. Although he denied his guilt for 4 weeks of the trial, a jury at Winchester Crown Court found Elliot Turner guilty of murder. He had earlier admitted to perverting the course of justice. Both parents, Lee and Anita, were also found guilty of the same crime, perverting the course of justice. While Elliot was convicted by a majority of 10 to 2, he was to be sentenced on a further date after 9 hours of deliberation by the jury. Simon Jones, Crown Advocate for the Crown Prosecution Service of Wessex, He said Emily Longley was a popular and beautiful young girl who enjoyed life, like any other teenager. Mark and Caroline Longley spoke after the verdict to pay tribute to their child. Emily's mother said, "You have lost a part of you. Something has gone and you just have to learn to live without them. As a parent, all you want to do is to protect your child, and we couldn't be there to help her. She basically died alone in that bedroom. We heard what he did to her, and then just walked away and left her." Emily's father added, "It's a terrible waste of a promising life. The world really was a better place with Emily in it. It really was. What shocked me is the lack of remorse, not just from him, but from his parents as well throughout the trial. We've had to look at them in the court and outside. His mother's eyes caught both of our eyes a lot, and there's never been the slightest hint of remorse." After the court's judgment was passed, Elliot appealed it. His counsel argued that covert means were used in obtaining the evidence that was used against him. The case, however, was dismissed by the judges in the Court of Appeal. A large number of Emily's family were in court, and it took less than 5 minutes for the Lord Chief Justice to conclude about the dismissal of the appeal. Elliot Turner was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 16 years. His parents were sentenced to 27 months in prison for perverting the course of justice. They had served half of it before they were released. However, Anita Turner, who was born in Indonesia, was at risk of being deported to her home country. Under British law, it is the Home Secretary's duty to deport any non-European foreign national sentenced to 12 months or longer in prison. Emily's father Mark now says that it is the duty of men to tell other men to do right by their spouse or girlfriends.
The police didn't really tell us much until the day before the trial began. And then they outlined Elliot Turner's behaviour from the start of the relationship, which was in February, to the night he murdered Emily in May. And then, you know, and I was shocked. I remember sitting in that meeting with the police as they told me this catalogue of behaviour that Elliot Turner had done to Emily in such a short space of time. And I was deeply shocked. And, you know, and my first reaction was, why did no one do anything? You know, why did no one stop him or rein him in? And this behaviour went from verbal abuse to much more extreme examples of him putting his hand around her throat on a number of occasions and in public. You know, and again, this action it's something people often dismiss, but it's a very aggressive and very dominant action to put your hand around someone who's weaker and smaller than you's throat. You know, you're basically saying, I have the power to kill you now. And he told people he was going to kill her. In the short space of time, it had every sign was there, you know, and I just, you know, my reaction was, why did no one pick this up?
He added by saying the grief of losing his daughter was still with him, and that was okay by him, saying, "Grief is not a bad thing. I don't want to stop feeling sad that Emily died." Some crimes, no matter how much you consider the details of them, fail to ever really make sense. For many of us, a mother is a real-life angel in our lives, someone that we can rely on for unconditional love. But for others, a mother is someone not to be trusted, and in fact, they are someone to be feared. This is an additional warning for viewer discretion. Elizabeth Diane Downs was born in Phoenix, Arizona on August 7th, 1955, to parents Wesley Linden and Willardine Fredrickson. Her family was conservative in its values, which meant that Diane, the name that she went by, wasn't allowed to wear things that other girls her age often did, like makeup or stylish clothing. As a result, Diane didn't always fit in with the other girls, and sometimes this meant that she was picked on. Diane didn't like her father's rules and lectures, which she felt were just too strict. She also began to resent how little time her mother spent with her, and how much time her mother spent with her father. As children sometimes do when they think their parents are too strict, Diane began to rebel shortly after turning 14. She met a man named Steve Downs during her time as a student at Moon Valley High School in Phoenix. Her parents didn't like that she was dating Steve. He was 2 years older than she was, but she kept seeing him anyway. When Steve graduated from high school, he joined the Navy. When Diane then graduated from high school, she began attending Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College. This was located in Orange, California. Her college career, however, only lasted 1 year. This was because she was kicked out for her alleged promiscuous behavior. After her expulsion, she went back to Arizona to stay with her parents once again. While Steve and Diane were apart, they stayed in contact until Steve came back from the Navy. Once he was out, Diane and Steve got married in November of 1973. They then had a daughter named Christiane in 1974, and another daughter named Cheryl in 1976. Despite their growing family, Steve and Diane had an unstable marriage right from the very beginning. Diane frequently left him and lived with her parents again before once again going back to Steve. When Diane became pregnant again after her first 2 children, she made the decision to have an abortion to end the pregnancy. She did, however, feel bad about her choice. She later decided she would like to have more children. Steve, who apparently didn't want any more children, had a vasectomy after Diane terminated this pregnancy. Allegedly, Diane had multiple affairs and became pregnant once again. As a result of her affairs, Diane gave birth in 1979 to Steve and Daniel, her 3rd child. Steve was upset about Diane's affairs and knew that their child wasn't his. The couple had also now been fighting about money. This seemed to be a constant source of contention in their marriage. Their issues caused them to finally divorce in 1980. Now, Diane had to support herself financially, so in 1981, she began working full-time at the United States Postal Service. Neighbours had started to notice that she wasn't a nurturing mother to her 3 children. Her children would often ask for food and didn't have warm clothes to wear during the winter. Sometimes Christy, who was only 6 at the time, would be left in charge of her younger siblings. And Cheryl had once stated to a neighbour that she was scared of her mother. Despite her reported failings as a mother, Diane earned extra money by becoming a surrogate mother. Diane gave birth to another child named Jennifer on May 8, 1982. As a result of this surrogacy, Diane was paid $10,000. As part of the criteria for becoming a surrogate mother, Diane had to take 2 psychiatric tests. One of these tests yielded alarming results. It implied that Diane was in fact psychotic. Diane would joke to her friends about the results of this test. By April of 1983, Diane had decided she needed a fresh start and she moved to Oregon. On May 19, 1983, Diane, now living in Oregon, would begin making headlines all across the United States. Diane drove that night to Mackenzie Williamette Hospital in Springfield, Oregon. There, hospital staff had a grisly sight to deal with. Diane had been shot in her left arm. Her 3 children had also been shot in the car at close range. Cheryl had sadly lost her life as a result of this shooting, and 3-year-old Danny, as Stephen was now known, had been paralysed from the waist down due to his wounds. The oldest child, 8-year-old Christy, had a stroke from her injuries. Both of these children's injuries were extremely serious. It wasn't immediately certain if they'd be able to survive. Diane's injury, however, wasn't so serious. She was able to speak with hospital employees to tell them just what had happened. She said she took her children to a friend's house to visit, and afterwards she had decided to take a scenic route home. This was even though it was dark and all her kids were already sleeping in the car. According to Diane's account, as she drove on a deserted rural road in the Springfield area at around 10 p.m, she saw a bushy-haired man standing in the road. He was attempting to get her attention so that she would stop. She told police and hospital workers that she stopped to speak with the man to see what he wanted. He quickly told her to give him the keys to her car. When she refused, a physical fight ensued, and he then shot her in the arm. He then proceeded to open the door to the driver's seat of her vehicle and shot each of her offspring, according to Diane. She said she only escaped after tricking the man into thinking she had thrown her car keys alongside the road when in fact she hadn't. Diane said when he went to search for her keys, she got into the driver's seat and drove to the hospital. Immediately, the police department warned the public to watch out for an armed man who might be on the loose, a man that would present a threat to anyone else he crossed paths with. However, a number of things led police to be skeptical of Diane's story right from the beginning. This included her reportedly calm reaction at the hospital after allegedly witnessing a horrific crime against her children, despite the fact that one of her children had lost their battle in front of her, and the other two were now in the hospital fighting for their lives. Diane didn't seem upset. She made comments that seemed heartless considering what the children had just been through. Comments such as how the blood had ruined her car, and how the shooting had ruined her vacation. It was also strange that she would choose to take a deserted scenic route in the dark, when she wouldn't even be able to see any of the scenery. The police thought it was odd that Diane, who was right-handed, would suffer a gunshot wound to her left arm while struggling with the gunman. Police reasoned that it would have actually been likelier for the would-be carjacker to just end Diane, before he attempted to shoot her sleeping offspring who couldn't defend themselves.
When he swung around, he was pointing, when he swung around, it hit the tips of my fingers. The gun hit the tips of my fingers, and that snapped me. And I went, wait a minute. I'm not trapped by society. I don't care if he is bigger. If I stand here and I say, yeah, here, take the keys. I mean, there's nothing I can do. You win because you have the gun. My kids are going to die. And I'm not going to let my kids die. And so instead of giving him the keys, I feigned throwing the keys. He did not take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids. When he was swinging in the direction of the keys, firing the gun, he hit my arm. Everybody says, you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. I have a steel plate on my arm. I will for 1.5 years. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died. Except maybe Danny.
There were other unusual behaviours too, such as calling a married man named Robert Knickerbocker from the hospital. She used to work with Knickerbocker in Arizona and she did have an affair with him. However, Knickerbocker indicated to the police that he was happy when she moved to Oregon. He reportedly told police that Diane had in fact stalked him, and he feared she might potentially murder his wife so that the two of them could be together again. After Diane moved to Oregon, Knickerbocker and his wife were able to mend their relationship. A forensic investigation didn't support Diane's version of events. When the driver's side of the vehicle was searched for clues, blood spatter couldn't be found. There was also no gunpowder residue on the door. This seemed strange if the shooter had truly opened that door and angled the weapon to shoot in the back seat. Police determined that the gun that had been used in the murder was a .22 pistol. However, the murder weapon was never found. While Diane did not tell the authorities that she was a gun owner, Knickerbocker and her ex-husband Steve told the police that she did own a gun, a .22 pistol, a weapon that she had bought while living in Arizona. To further discredit Diane's story, her statement that she drove quickly to the hospital was contradicted by witnesses. They in fact saw her vehicle moving at a snail's pace towards a hospital. These witnesses estimated her driving speed to be only 5 to 7 miles per hour. This is obviously much slower than a concerned mother would be driving in this situation. 4 days following this shocking crime, police asked Diane to do a reenactment of the events from that night.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys.
Diane was laughing and smiling for the cameras that were recording the reenactment. Further proof that she wasn't too upset or traumatized by what had happened to her children. Evidence kept on mounting up against Diane, and on February 28, 1984, She was arrested and faced charges of murder, attempted murder, and criminal assault. After her arrest, Diane's story slightly changed. She had always alleged that a man fired the shots during a failed carjacking, but in later versions she said that the man knew her name, implying that he knew her. The case went to trial. During her court appearances, prosecution painted a picture of Diane as a mother who would willingly sacrifice her children so that she could continue to be with Knickerbocker, a man who didn't want to raise children. It was Diane's tendency for talking too much that made her look guilty in the first place, with her making unusual statements at the hospital. And in her court case, her words would once again hurt her, but this time they were in written form. Her secret diaries revealed her obsession with Knickerbocker and the ominous fact that he didn't want to be around children. The last entry Diane wrote in her diary was just 2 days before the incident. During her trial, Diane's childhood relationship with Steve and her ability as a mother were all brought into the limelight. Whilst talking about her younger years, Diane said she didn't marry Steve because she was in love with him. She'd only married him to get away from her parents so that she could have children. Diane's lawyer tried to explain her strange and detached behaviour at the hospital after the shootings. She pointed to her strict upbringing at the hands of her father. Diane testified she was never allowed to cry or show her emotions as a child. One of the key pieces of testimony in the trial came from someone who had allegedly witnessed Diane shooting her offspring. Her daughter, Christy, had recovered enough from her injury after months of therapy to be able to speak once again. Christy said that she never saw a man on the night of the crime. While crying, she testified that her mother parked up along the side of a road and shot each one of her children before pointing the gun at her own arm and pulling the trigger once more. Christie's brave testimony left no doubt in the case, and on June 17, 1984, Diane was found guilty on each charge. Diane Downs received a sentence of life in prison and an additional 50 years. Despite the lengthy sentence, Diane was eligible to apply for parole after just 25 years of her sentence. Shortly after her trial ended, Diane had her 5th child. This was a girl who was placed in the custody of the state of Oregon until she was luckily adopted. Diane said the father was someone she had seduced whilst working on her postal route before she had been arrested. The lead prosecutor in the case, Fred Hughey, and his wife, later adopted Christy and Danny, Diane's 2 children who had survived the attack. Diane wasn't through with making news headlines after she began serving her time in prison. In 1987, she climbed a tall wire fence to escape from the Oregon Women's Correctional Center in Oregon. She eluded capture for 10 days, and when she was finally found, another 5 years were added to her sentence. She was also now moved to New Jersey Department of Corrections. This was after Hughey argued that the prison she escaped from was too close to Danny and Christy, who were now in his care. Diane's horrific, sensationalized crime captured the interest of Hollywood. A TV movie called Small Sacrifices with Farrah Fawcett starring as Diane came out in 1989. At 2 parole hearings in 2010 and 2020, Diane continued to insist that she wasn't responsible for the crime.
They brought in a mock-up of the car, and Fred Hughey got a gun, and he was reenacting the crime. And when he was going through the motions of firing the gun at the Christy doll and at the Cheryl doll and at the Danny doll, he couldn't shoot the Danny doll because the Danny doll was back here. And he raised up and he looked at me, and I went like this, and he went, his face, he had a look of incredulation on his face, and his mouth started to open, and I nodded my head yes, and he had to switch the gun to the left hand. A right-handed person could not have shot the Danny doll. He adopted my children, and according to Christy, never said a bad word against me. Ever. That was out of Christy's mouth. Fred Hughey, in all the time that he raised her, never spoke ill of me. I believe that Fred Hughey knows that there is a man out there that was hunting my children, and it wasn't until after Christy told her schoolmates, she drew pictures in school, and she said, "This is the man who shot us." I lied in court because they wanted me to say this and they wouldn't leave me alone. Dr. Peters. She said Dr. Peterson kept pressuring me and he wouldn't leave me alone.
Both of her parole attempts so far have been denied, and she remains in prison. In the heart of Kilclare Gardens, a working-class neighbourhood in the southern reaches of Dublin, lived the Mulhall family. John and Kathleen Mulhall were parents to 3 boys and 3 girls. Kathleen, whose roots trace back to the travelling community as Kathleen Ward, faced maltreatment within her marriage to John. Linda Mulhall, aged 30, had a troubled life. She was unemployed, she left school early, and she had to care for 4 children after her relationship with their father ended. She entered another relationship with Wayne Kinsella, a man who frequently maltreated them all. This included physically harming the children with an electrical flex cable. Social services intervened, placing the children in care, and Kinsella served a 7-year prison sentence for his crime. Linda, with a history of alcohol addiction and substance use, had a larceny conviction from 1993. At age 21, Charlotte Mulhall, Linda's sister, also had a troubled history marked by substance and alcohol misuse. This was as well as several minor convictions for criminal damage and public order offences. She was also involved in low-end escorting. In 2002, Kathleen, the mother of Charlotte and Linda, began a relationship with Farah Noor while still living with her husband, John Mulhall. Farah Noor, who had immigrated to Ireland in December of 1996 under the guise of Shalila Salim from Somalia, claimed his family had perished in the Somali civil war. However, investigations into his background disclosed his Kenyan identity, along with the truth that his wife and 2 children were in fact still alive. Initially, he was going to be deported, but an appeal granted him Irish citizenship in 1999. This was due to his status as the father of an Irish-born child. Farah's history reveals a series of offences. There were past convictions for intoxication, threatening behaviour and assault. This was along with a deeply disturbing case, a case of violating a mentally disabled 16-year-old Chinese girl. This happened in 1997, which resulted in her giving birth to a son. Additionally, 2 other women bore children through assault by him. His criminal record includes multiple charges of disorderly conduct and assault. These even involved a violation with a sharp implement present at the scene, an event which led to 3 convictions. Remarkably, despite these offences, Farah never served time in jail. As mentioned before, the Mulhall's marriage was filled with violence and cruelty. John heavily maltreated Kathleen and the children. Kathleen had already gone through 10 years of a toxic marriage, and on top of it, she found out that John was cheating on her. Despite all of this, as a stay-at-home mother, she felt trapped and was afraid of leaving because of financial insecurities. Seeking help, she started socializing, and then she met Farah. In him, she found the affection and care that she so desperately craved. Wanting to break free from the unhealthy marriage, she asked John to leave, but he refused. Eventually, she reported him to the police, and this made John Mulhall finally leave the home. Farah then moved in, initially a situation that was bringing happiness into the home, but soon he revealed his true nature as a violent alcoholic. The decision to move to Cork was a hope for a fresh start for Kathleen and Farah. They attempted to move far away from the family rift. However, the situation did not improve. In fact, it worsened. With no witnesses, Farah would treat Kathleen even worse than John did. While he stayed at home, Farah found a job in Cork. He left her confined in a bedroom during his work hours, confined to hide the bruises and injuries inflicted by him. Kathleen spent her days in bed. She was left alone, pondering the prior night's events that triggered Farah's anger. She hoped that changing herself and avoiding provocation might stop the attacks. After all, despite this mistreatment, she still harboured a love for Farah. Kathleen, enduring severe wounds from Farah's abuse, decided to secretly get medical help. She often claimed that she had been robbed to explain her severe injuries. After 2 years away, she and Farah returned to Dublin, with Kathleen hopeful that the change would rekindle Farah's more compassionate side. Unfortunately, during a night out, their celebratory mood soured into an argument. This culminated in Farah physically assaulting Kathleen in public view. The fortunate presence of a police car allowed officers to witness the altercation in broad daylight, and despite Kathleen's pleading, the police detained Farah. However, because Kathleen refused to cooperate or provide a statement, the police were unable to intervene effectively. Even though they saw him physically harming her, the absence of Kathleen's testimony left them unable to hold him, and this eventually resulted in his release. Kathleen's children, however, had different reactions. Some of them, like Marie and Andrew, were upset and moved in with John, while Charlotte supported her mother out of deep love and devotion. She didn't want to leave her alone. Living with Farah exposed Kathleen to his alter ego, transforming him from a kind soul in the morning to a violent man when under the influence in the evening. On the eve of Charlotte's 22nd birthday in 2005, Kathleen and Farah celebrated St. Patrick's Day by drinking heavily and wandering off the streets of Dublin city centre. Farah decided not to go to work that day. His boss called in to ask him why he hadn't shown up, but it was Kathleen who answered the phone and explained that their child was sick. That obviously was not true. Kathleen and Farah had been drinking throughout the entire day. The two then called Charlotte, inviting her to join them in the city centre. Linda, Charlotte's sister, wasn't keen on joining them, but she was convinced by Charlotte. Kathleen and Farah were already intoxicated upon their arrival. Farah bought vodka and Kathleen bought Coca-Cola. They drank it while strolling through the city before settling at the River Liffey boardwalk. There, Charlotte and her mother took illicit party substances. Upon returning to Kathleen's flat, the women took even more of this substance. Kathleen discreetly crushed a tablet into Farah's drink. They wanted to make sure that they were all under the influence of the same thing. Linda, Farah, and Charlotte were sitting closely together on a two-seater couch. Then, Farah started inappropriately touching Linda. He even whispered into her ear and put his arms around her waist, refusing to let her go. Kathleen, rightly so, erupted into anger. She engaged in a heated argument with Farah. Then, in the heat of the moment, Kathleen told her daughters to just end his life for her. And they did just that. Charlotte grabbed a sharp implement. She then struck Farah across the throat. This caused him to collapse. Linda then took a heavy object, repeatedly striking him on the head, all while their mother, Kathleen, observed the scene without lifting a finger. That day, Farah sustained a total of at least 27 wounds, but possibly even more. The act was done. It was time to come up with a plan to hide the man's now lifeless body. Farah was subsequently dismembered. The women decided not to dispose of the head in the canal to avoid possible identification. Instead, they carried the head via bus to Tallaght, passing through the square shopping centre en route to Timon North Park. In the park, Charlotte used a sharp implement to dig a hole, and there they intended to bury the head. Kathleen discarded of the sharp implements and heavy objects used in the attack in a nearby pond. Later, allegedly, Linda returned to the park, dug up the head, and transported it in her son's school bag to a field in the Killinarden estate, also in Tallaght. Using another heavy object, she then shattered it, before going on to bury it again to make sure there wasn't any trace of this horrific crime. Everything went unnoticed until, that is, 10 days later, when a leg, still clothed in a sock, was found floating in the canal near to Croke Park. It was initially mistaken for a discarded mannequin due to the sock concealing signs of decay. The leg caught the attention of a passerby who then informed the police. Police divers discovered more of Farah's dismembered body in 7 parts, eventually identifying him through a media-driven identification appeal. The crucial breakthrough in linking Noor to the Mulhall women came from a Somali man after recognizing a t-shirt on the recovered torso. Farah's head and private parts were never recovered. Following their arrest in August of 2005, the Mulhall family firmly denied any knowledge of the events. However, Linda later reached out to the investigating officers. She confessed her involvement in the crime. This confession, made in the same month at her residence in Tallaght, significantly changed the course of the investigation, an investigation which had previously made limited headway. Subsequent searches of the Mulhall flat in Summerhill revealed bloodstains matching Farah Noor's DNA to that of the DNA discovered in the body parts. After Linda's confession, Kathleen fled the country in September of 2005. She lived in England until authorities located her again in January of 2008. In the legal proceedings, Linda and Charlotte were charged with murder. They stood trial in the Central Criminal Court. The trial occurred in October of 2006, resulting in Linda Mulhall being convicted of manslaughter. Her defence focused in on provocation. The jurors accepted Linda's defence, which led to her conviction on the lesser charge of manslaughter, while Charlotte was convicted of the murder of Farah Noor. Following the trial, Charlotte Mulhall received a mandatory life sentence, while Linda Mulhall was sentenced to 15 years for manslaughter. The judge paid attention to Linda's substance addiction, noting her attempt to disrupt the trial by refusing to take her methadone. Both sisters were denied leave to appeal their sentences. Linda appealed the severity of her sentence, arguing that it was delivered without crucial psychiatric and probation reports. However, this appeal was unsuccessful, as the Court of Criminal Appeal upheld the initial sentence. After serving over 12 years of her 15-year term, Linda was released in 2018. She chose to keep a low profile and, in July of the same year, when approached by a reporter, she expressed her desire to move on with her life. She declined to make further comment. This case is so crazy, it's almost unbelievable. I have brought you over 130 cases on this channel so far, so I am kind of hard to shock. But this one shocked me. You have been warned. Peter Bryan was born in London in 1969 to 2 immigrant parents from Barbados. They moved over to England in the 1950s. They were simply looking for a better life for their children. Peter was the youngest of 7 siblings. Their parents worked every single day of the week. That meant that Peter and his other siblings were tended to by minders. Peter's mother was especially absent. She spent large stretches of his childhood in Barbados with her older children who had not crossed over during the move. Because he didn't get the direct attention and care that he required, Peter grew up living largely unchecked. At Shaftesbury Junior School in Forest Gate, he developed an appetite for bullying boys who were physically smaller than him. He would take their lunch money, call them names, and generally demean them. There's a record of him making children his age tie his shoelaces. Peter struck wherever he saw weakness, and this was only exacerbated when he became a teenager. He joined a street gang at a young age and started smoking illicit substances at age 12. Experts think that the early substance use severely hampered his mental development. This could have been a contributing factor to his later psychosis. There's also a record of mental illness in the family, so there could be a genetic component to it as well. Peter's attitude grew worse when he entered Trinity Secondary School in Canning Town. Teachers reported that he seemed to get a sadistic kick out of dominating people and crushing their spirits. He also robbed people, touched girls inappropriately, heckled people, and even slapped a female teacher. Peter only got a suspension for that transgression. He managed to remain in high school until he was 15 years old, and that was when he dropped out, something that wasn't unusual at the time. It was a combination of being dyslexic and requiring a tutor to learn, a general disdain for the school and its people, and his desire to live by his own rules. From this point, things would take a radical and tragic turn for Peter, as well as those unfortunate enough to catch his eye. In 1987, at 18 years old, Peter Bryan had his first run-in with the police. He lived at the Flying Angel Custom House in East London, and he worked at a clothes stall on a market. The police received a call when he attempted to throw another resident off of the 6th floor window. According to the victim, the attack was entirely unprovoked. This hinted that Bryan was perhaps suffering from some type of psychotic episode. His actions weren't based in our reality. Ultimately, the police took no action against Bryan, and perhaps if they had, they would have stopped what came next. Although you've probably never heard of this man before, Peter Bryan goes on to become one of the most terrifying criminals of the 21st century. But for his monstrous pedigree, he grew up in a fairly ordinary place. East London in the 1970s and 80s was wildly different from what it is today. But the highlights of the city have remained the same throughout the generations. It is the capital and largest city of England and the United Kingdom. It houses a diverse population of 8 million people. At its centre is the Houses of Parliament, Big Ben and Westminster Abbey. Nisha Sheth was a 20-year-old college student. They were the oldest child of the Sheth family. She had a 12-year-old smart-mouthed brother and worked for her parents to support herself while she attended university. The Sheths were an affluent Indian family. They owned multiple fashionable Kings Road boutiques scattered throughout London. After a brief stint at the clothes stall and then teaching cooking classes in a soup shelter, Bryan landed one of the best jobs of his adult life. He worked as a shop assistant to Nisha. Nisha always found Bryan more than a little bit strange and frankly intimidating at times. He was a large, heavy-set man, and he made a habit of invading her space. He would touch her inappropriately and then go on long protracted speeches. He would mutter about things that nobody else understood. The first few months of working with Peter were decent enough, but over time his personal hygiene, personality and mind seemed to deteriorate. He would change his appearance and hairstyles frequently, fully bearded on one day, clean shaven the next. It was also an open secret that Bryan was a local delinquent. He bragged about how he had mugged girls like Nisha, how he had extorted people, and how he had sold illicit substances. Bryan did whatever he could to supplement his income from the shops, income which he often blew through by buying illicit substances. Nisha was not the only person who saw the sort of danger Peter presented. Her mother saw it too. Mrs. Sheth noticed Peter was erratic and, at some point, started walking around with a claw hammer which he'd stolen from their tool shed. On one occasion, he even told her that he wanted to kill somebody, but given his eccentricities, she didn't know what to believe. Towards the end of his stay with the Sheths, he even struck her on the shin with his belt. When Mrs. Sheth reported Peter's behaviour to her husband, he simply did not believe her. Peter treated him with respect and fairly whenever he saw him, and this meant that he grew to like him. Although he often disappeared from work for days to weeks at a time, Mr. Sheth was still willing to give him another chance. That choice would soon come to cost him everything. Bryan's infatuation with Nisha Sheth was no mystery. He'd made his intentions obvious, and on one occasion he brought Nisha a nail box with flowers inside. When Nisha's brother noticed the sticker on the side and asked him where he'd stolen them from, Peter swallowed the sticker to hide the evidence and laughed off the entire interaction. Shortly after this, Nisha reported Bryan for stealing clothes from their shop. She'd caught him in the act one day and told her father about it immediately. Peter felt betrayed and showed up at the store 1 week later. It was now March the 18th, 1993. He had a claw hammer in his hand. He went after Nisha's 12-year-old brother, knocking him to the side. He then assaulted Nisha, who was on the phone at the time. The police report said that he hit her so hard that the white of her brain was visible. Nisha's brother watched it all happen. Bryan then fled the scene of the crime when he realised what he'd done. A random bystander noticed something was wrong and chased after him. Bryan managed to lose them before climbing onto the roof of a building. He was high on illicit substances and trying to throw himself off. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, his survival instinct kicked in. He grabbed hold of one of the ledges of the building as he climbed down. Eventually though, his grip failed him. He then plummeted several floors, shattering both of his ankles. Bryan claimed diminished responsibility. He was sentenced to Rampton Secure Hospital indefinitely after he admitted to the murder of Nisha. This was much to the protest of the Sheth family. They wanted a stricter sentence for Bryan, but psychologists determined that he was mentally ill. He said he was convinced that Nisha was teasing him, and she had demanded that he kill her. In 1994, Bryan was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital. There, he did make considerable progress according to the nursing staff, but he did still have occasional hiccups. There, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was reported to have been initially violent, but he then settled down into the institute. Every once in a while, though, his mental health deteriorated, and Bryan was caught doing alarming things. Whilst inside, he claimed to have gotten a kick from Nisha's death, and it seemed that he misremembered the event. He also threatened nurses with violence when he didn't get his way on several occasions. Eventually though, Bryan managed to get a handle on his outbursts. In time, he masked his psychopathic tendencies so well that his doctors were convinced he was better. In 2001, just over 7 years after the death of Nisha, Bryan was transferred to the care of a social worker and psychiatrist. Both of these people, unfortunately, had very little experience with killers like Bryan. He was moved to Riverside Hostel in London. This is a minimum security men's facility in northeast London. There, Bryan was free to come and go as he pleased, and he did behave himself for the most part, but he was caught smoking illicit substances and tested positive for amphetamines more than once. Things quickly escalated once more when Bryan assaulted a 17-year-old girl by blowing raspberries on her stomach. The police were called in, but nothing ever came of the matter. Bryan admitted to this crime of his own free will, and he was subsequently transferred to Newham Hospital's open ward for his safety after the girl's family threatened him with violence. In Newham, Bryan was once more free to come and go as he pleased. At this point, it had been 11 years since any significant violent incident had happened. He was seen as recovering, as safe, and a poster child for mental health and prison reform. It was during this time that he met a woman who introduced him to Brian Cherry. Everyone that knew Cherry described him as a kind-hearted loner, but someone who would let other people take advantage of him instead of being alone. Nicola Newman was the name of the woman who introduced Cherry to Peter. She was an addict who would show up at Cherry's house every so often to hang out and to take money from him. The depth of Peter and Brian's relationship was only known to the two of them, but it must have been fairly intimate for him to choose Cherry out of everyone that he had encountered. Peter headed over to Brian Cherry's flat in Walthamstow on February the 17th, 2004. He was armed once more with a claw hammer, a screwdriver, and a Stanley knife. He arrived at Cherry's at 6 p.m. He then attacked him with the hammer. He struck him 24 times, but didn't stop there. Peter proceeded to dismember Brian with the knife and the screwdriver that he brought with him. He cut around the arm joints before applying considerable pressure to dislocate the joint and extract it. Peter Bryan then removed part of Brian Cherry's brain. He dropped it in a frying pan with some clover butter, and he placed another portion of it in a sieve by the kitchen sink. The fried portion was then consumed. At around 7:15, Nicola Newman let herself into Cherry's flat. As one of his only friends, she had a key to his apartment. She was stunned when she noticed the strong smell of disinfectant coming from deep within the house. It was then that Bryan emerged from the living room, bare-chested and sweaty, holding a sharp implement. When Nicola asked him where Brian Cherry was, he asked her to leave. She, however, persisted with her questioning, and it was then that Peter Bryan said, "Brian is dead." Naturally, Nicola didn't believe him and walked past him to look deeper into the flat. To her utter horror, she found Brian Cherry unclothed and deceased on the floor. Immediately, Nicola understood just how precarious her situation now was. Slowly and calmly, she exited the apartment and told Peter that she needed to leave. She ran for her life when she was clear from the flat, and then placed a call to the police to report this heinous crime. The police arrived at a scene that they'll go on to discuss in therapy for years to come. They found Peter Bryan waiting for them in the hallway. He was stood in the dark with his blood-stained hands, jeans and trainers. In the kitchen, they saw what remained of Brian's feast, and the tub of clover that he'd used to fry it in. They noticed that the meat had pieces of bone, skin and hair still attached to it. When they saw what was left of Cherry's head, they immediately put two and two together. Peter Bryan declared to their utter horror, "I ate his brain with butter. It was really nice." He later added upon his arrest, "I would have done something else if you hadn't come along. I wanted their souls." Considering that Peter Bryan was found covered with red fluids, and with the objects that he used to end Brian Cherry within reach, there was still a surprising amount of investigating to be done. The analysis by the pathologist showed just how sick Peter still was, and how adept he'd been at covering it up for all these years. The severed left leg was partly sawn and partly fractured. At the top of the left, the muscle had been completely divided, and superficial sawing of the bone had commenced. These were the words of the pathologist. They concluded that Bryan was most likely interrupted before he could complete the amputation of the leg, and Peter Bryan later admitted as much when he was interviewed. He said, "I used the Stanley knife to cut them off, and some other kitchen knife, but I had to stomp on them to break the bone." The investigators discovered that both Bryan's psychiatrist and social workers did not have the experience or background to manage someone as manipulative and dangerous as he was. The social worker lacked any mental health training, and the psychiatrist had Bryan as his first patient. The case of Peter Bryan revealed a systemic issue within the justice system. It showed how the system could be manipulated for the benefit of people like Peter. Unfortunately though, the case of Peter Bryan does not end here. After his arrest, he told authorities that he wanted to kill again, and that is exactly what he did. He was sent to Pentonville jail. There he told one member of staff that he wanted to end him, and he told another that he wanted to eat his nose. During his entire stay at that jail, he had to be minded with riot gear. He was later transferred to Broadmoor Maximum Security Hospital in April of 2004. There they could watch and manage him better. However, his minders made the crucial mistake of transferring him to a minimum security risk ward. Again, they thought he'd settled down. Richard Loudwell was a 60-year-old man awaiting trial for the murder of an 82-year-old woman. He had allegedly violated and throttled her. This earned him the universal ire and hatred of everybody at the hospital, and Bryan felt the exact same way. On April 25th, 2004 at 6:10 p.m, two members of staff heard two loud bangs coming from the dining room. They found Mr. Loudwell lying on the floor next to a table. His face was covered in red vital fluids and there were marks on his neck. Somebody had throttled him with the cord from their trousers and had struck him on the head. He died of bronchopneumonia caused by severe brain injuries on June 5th. When Peter was found, he confessed to the murder almost instantly. He said, "I get these urges, you see. I've had them ever since I saw him. He's at the bottom of the food chain, old and haggard. He looked like he'd had his innings. I just waited for my chances to get at him. I wanted to kill and eat him. I didn't have much time. If I did, I'd have tried to cook and eat him." When asked if he thought eating people was normal, he replied, "Of course, it's normal. Cannibalism is normal. It's been there for centuries. If I was on the street, I'd go for someone bigger, for the challenge. I wanted to cook him, but there was no time." On March the 15th, 2005, Judge Giles Forrester served Peter Bryan with 2 life sentences after he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder, but with diminished responsibility. The trial took place at the Old Bailey. Several witnesses were called forward by the prosecution. They wanted to give the jury a more comprehensive understanding of who Peter Bryan actually was. Decorated psychiatrist Dr. Martin Locke had the displeasure to carry out a series of interviews with Bryan, and he declared him the most dangerous man I have ever assessed. Bryan told the doctor, "You look like a brainy chap, and you're quite slim. I think I could take you." Bryan also described his second victim's limb as tasting like chicken. Coroner Peter Bedford described Bryan as chillingly manipulative. Judge Forrester had this to say before he gave the sentence. "You killed on these last 2 occasions because of a thrill and the feeling of power it gave you when you were flesh." Deemed too dangerous, Peter was sedated even during his trial, and he was escorted by several of Broadmoor's largest nurses. He is being held there indefinitely. Even after Lord Chief Justice Phillips overturned the whole life tariff in 2006, turning his sentence to 15 years minimum. Considering the crimes Bryan committed and his mental state, it is highly unlikely he will ever be released to the public ever again. The mental health system is even harder to escape than jail.
And it was all planned.
I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense.
Nicholas Waggoner Browning was born on February the 9th, 1992, to John W. Browning, a successful lawyer at a local firm, and Tamara Browning, a homemaker. Nicholas grew up with 2 younger brothers, 14-year-old Gregory and 11-year-old Benjamin. They all lived together in a nice family home in the suburbs of Cockeysville, Maryland. Nicholas attended Delaney High School near Timonium. There he was an honour student, he played varsity lacrosse and golf, and he also practiced the cello. Most people called him Nick for short. Nick also skied and was a Boy Scout under his father. He was a scoutmaster, a church leader and a pillar of the community. Nick was the Browning family's golden boy. He was bred from a young age by John to be perfect, and any sort of disobedience or mistake was met with swift and painful retribution. Nick's home life was tumultuous and complicated. He often spoke about it with his closest friends, Alex Smith, Taylor Delaney and Ryan Fingles. Nick made it a habit of calling his father names like Hitler, and he even joked on occasion about wanting to end him for riding him so hard. He acted out by sneaking alcohol and ignoring his responsibilities. He would do things like hanging out with his friends and play video games instead. Students who knew Nick from afar described him as a little mean. He was not above heckling a disabled person or calling people names. His teachers, however, described him as a saint. Nick was somewhat of a social butterfly. He could be charming, charismatic, outspoken and intelligent when he needed to be, and that was what made what happened to the Brownings so shocking for the people that only knew the gentler side of Nick. Cockeysville is a quiet little town named after the founding family. It has a population of around 20,000 people. It has tight-knit communities with churches, scenic parks, and quality public schools. You'll find few safer places to raise a family in America, and that is why the Brownings settled down there. They lived in one of the more affluent neighborhoods in the suburbs of Cockeysville with their children. Little did John and Tamara Browning know that the one place they felt the safest was where danger would eventually find them. Friday, February the 1st, 2008, started normal enough for Nick Browning. After school, his father dropped him off at Ryan Fingal's house, where Alex and Taylor were already waiting for him. Ryan lived in a community called Springdale. It had fancy lawns and pools about 1 mile away from Nick's house. Sometime after 2 p.m, they started playing lacrosse. They then moved over to video games. And finally, they wound down for the night with 2 movies, namely Robin Big and Accepted. Mr. Fingals was with the boys and he was also entertaining friends too. They ordered food from a restaurant called Giorgio's. Sometime around midnight, Nick had a crazy idea. He told the boys he was going to walk back home and get his car, so that they could drive around Cockeysville at night. He had no particular destination in mind. Nick was only 15 years old at the time. He was still a week out from his birthday. Driving a car without a license in the middle of the night must have sounded like fun. While the boys slept, Nick snuck out of Ryan Fingal's home. He then returned at some time around 6 a.m. Alex's call allegedly woke him up. He said he was sleeping in the car after making it to the garage. According to Nick, his parents were still up when he arrived. He said he stayed up for 2 more hours waiting for them to go to sleep. This would be his chance to take the car keys. However, he drifted off before they did. Alex and the boys had chosen to call him when they woke up at around 6 a.m. They were confused that he hadn't returned yet. Nick then walked back to the Fingals residence by himself and the day continued as usual. He took a shower, ate breakfast with the boys, and then called his parents on the Fingals house phone to tell them that he'd not be coming home early because he was going to the mall with the boys. However, no one answered the phone. Nick eventually switched to using his cell phone to call home after several more tries. He never managed to get a hold of them until he returned to the Browning household later that evening. Jump forward a few hours and the boys were returning to the Browning residence towards 5 p.m. Nick and the boys were looking forward to a long night of fun, but before that he seemed determined to check in on his family. By this stage he'd been calling them for hours with no reply. They came to the site of a bloodbath when they ventured into the house, entering using Nick's access code. Nick found his father dead on the couch in the living room and stood there frozen. The rest of Nick's friends reacted how you'd expect 15-year-olds who'd never seen a dead body to. Some refused to look, while others comforted Nick, a teenager who was seemingly stunned by loss and surprise. When he managed to gather himself, Nick climbed up the stairs to search for the rest of his family. He found them all dead in their beds. Taylor called on Mr. Smith, who'd been chaperoning them this entire time. Mr. Smith turned hysterical at the sight of his dead friend. He placed a call to the police department immediately. The police arrived at the Browning residence shortly after to a scene that made their blood curdle. Upon initial inspection of the crime scene, the police could tell something was not adding up immediately. The broken glass pointed to signs of burglary gone wrong, yet nothing seemed to be missing, nor were there any signs of forced entry. How the victims passed was also troubling. It was like they were executed before they could react. Why would a burglar execute his victims before trying to get their valuables first? The investigators were certain that the boys knew something. They took them all to the police station. There, they were interrogated by a detective in a quest to reconstruct the previous night. They had to determine if the boys were suspects for the murder of the Brownings. The police investigator instantly went to work, pressuring all 4 15-year-old boys. In hindsight, they could have asked for a lawyer present at any point. This would have put an end to the questioning, but either due to their ignorance, their fear, or just wanting to help, they kept talking to the investigator.
Dave. My name's Dave. Dave. What's your name, Ryan? Yes. All right. Good. Thanks for coming down here. I know it's kind of been a long day. Just need some basic information from you. It's Ryan, right? Yes. What's your middle name, Ryan? Middle name? Yes. Andrew. What's your last name? Fingles. Fingles.
I'm a homicide detective. Some bad stuff has happened tonight. I need you to be 100% honest with me. I want you to tell me what's been going on and explain. Who are you with all day?
I was with Ryan, Alex, and Nick. We were at Ryan's house in the morning because we slept over there last night.
What time did you guys get over there last night?
I went over there right after school.
You got there after school about what time?
Well, I went home first, and then my mom drove me over there around like 2:50 maybe.
2:15 or
2:50?
2:50.
Yeah.
Okay, what did you guys do there last night?
Mostly, we were playing lacrosse out front, and then we played video games, basically. Watched a movie.
What movie did you watch?
We were watching, what was it called? I remember we were watching Robin Big at first, and then we were looking through the movies. Accepted. We were watching Accepted.
Okay.
We started that around like 10:15 or something.
Okay, around 10:15 last night?
Yeah. I don't know, I fell asleep like halfway through it.
So,
and then...
Where were you guys in? What part of the house were you guys in?
In like the living room, the main room, family room, I guess you want to call it.
Where's your parents home?
Yes.
What's your last name? Smith. Oh, that's right. I just talked to your dad. Your dad's here. When you guys leave, I think he's going to take care of the other boys, get them to where they got to go. Okay. Any other nickname other than Alex? No. Street name or anything like that? No. You play lacrosse for Delaney?
Yes. You guys spent the entire evening together yesterday? Yes. Did you actually leave the house at all last night? Just walk around the neighborhood. Okay. How far do you live from where he lives?
Half a mile.
Half a mile? Did you guys go over there?
No.
Did he?
Yes.
What time did he go over there?
Like 12:30.
Last night?
Yes.
What did he go home for?
Truthfully, we were going to just take his car out.
I'm sorry, what was his name?
Nick Browning. Just take his car out for a little drive.
Okay. Did you guys do that?
No.
All of you were there?
Yes. Nick said that he was there. That when he got there, the lights were still on.
Okay.
And so he just was in the car, and he said he fell asleep. And like 3 hours later, or how many hours later, Alex called him and see where he was. He's like, oh, I fell asleep in the car, and then he came back to my house.
Okay.
So basically after that, when I woke up, I started watching this TV.
So you fell asleep?
Yeah. I woke back up around like 12 and went to bed. Went to like an actual bed. I was like on a couch.
Okay.
On a chair.
Woke up around midnight?
Yeah.
What bed did you go to?
I went into his brother's room, and then...
was Joe there?
Joe, no, he was not there.
Where's he?
He was at a friend's house.
Okay. So you went in Joe's room?
Yeah, and then the parents had friends over, and they weren't going to sleep there. Then they did.
The friends, the Fingles did?
Yeah, they're friends. So they came into Joe's room to sleep. So I had to get up, went down to the basement, and slept on the futon.
What time was that? About you remember?
I don't know what time that was. It was probably like 1:30 maybe.
When you woke up to go to Joe's room, where were all the other boys?
They were sleeping on the couch next to me and up in his room.
Okay. Was Nick there?
Yes.
You sure? That's real important.
No, I don't think he was.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, no.
He wasn't there?
He went out, I think. I don't
Taylor,
know.
I'm going to tell you now.
Yes.
This is a murder case.
Yes.
You're 15 years old.
Yes.
You cannot lie to me.
All right.
Because you will go to jail for the rest of your life.
Okay.
Nick was not in there?
No.
Do you know that he left?
What?
Do you know that he left?
I mean, yeah, I guess because I didn't see him there. I didn't know he was leaving.
Okay.
To tell the truth, I really don't know the exact times.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I didn't have like a clock I was looking at.
I'm with you. You haven't figured out by now something really serious has happened to the Browning family. You're 15 years old. I need you to be 100% honest. The other boys have been honest with me. You can't take up and lie. Okay? Yes. I'm going to ask you to take me through the last 28, 29 hours, what's been going on. So you guys, from what I know, Paul spent the night over at Finks, right?
Yes.
What did you guys do from there?
Well, we slept over, and in the morning,
Nick skipping over a lot, okay? But I want you to take it slow and not skip out stuff, okay?
Alright.
So last night you guys went there.
Yeah.
What did you guys do while you were there?
We ordered food from Giorgio's and watched Smoking Aces and Accepted and ran around outside a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we basically just all went to sleep.
Okay. Where were you guys watching TV and stuff? What room of the house?
In the living room.
Were Ryan's parents home?
Yes.
Was there other people there too?
Yes.
Ryan's parents?
Friends.
Gotcha. Who else was in the living room with you?
Nick.
Who else? Did Ryan go up to his room?
Yeah, Ryan went up to his room, and Taylor went up to Ryan's brother's room, and then moved downstairs.
Okay. Why did Taylor have to go downstairs?
Because Ryan's parents' friends were sleeping in his room.
Okay.
Are you sure you've been 100%? Is there something you should be telling me? Because I'm not telling you how important this is right now. Is there something you think?
Actually, he told me that he was going to go out, but he didn't tell me where he really was going.
Okay.
He said,
Taylor, I appreciate this. I mean,
he said he was going to go out. I mean, I don't know. He said he was going to go out, and then...
What did he tell you about that?
He said he might go and take the car, but he ended up...
Take his parents' car?
It was his car.
This entire ordeal lasted 6 whole hours, after which the police had already cracked the case of this mass murder. The lead detective started by questioning Nick, Alex, Taylor and Ryan about the day before. They all exhibited various signs of nervousness and concern, especially when pressured, but Nick remained calm. Even when he talked about his parents, who he had just discovered dead only a few hours before. His reaction could have been an unconscious defense mechanism to help him cope with the grief, but experts deduced that it was more likely that he didn't care at all. Throughout the investigation, the secrets of the Browning family's lives came to the open. The police learned that Nick endured routine verbal and physical lashings from his father, although the latter was never confirmed. Taylor remembered one instance of John calling Nick a failure, while Alex told the detective about Nick's pet name for his father, Hitler. Alex also revealed that Mother Tamara was an alcoholic, and that Nick hated that about her. Later interviews with his schoolmates revealed that Nick routinely joked about killing his father, and at times he included his mother and brothers in those fantasies too. The interrogation also revealed that he had intimate knowledge of firearms, as well as easy access to the workbench where the gun had been kept. There was also the small matter of Nick denying ever speaking to his brother Greg, when 2 of his friends remembered him calling his brother and asking him to leave the basement door open. Nick also had the keys to his car when he denied ever entering the house, and this was where the keys were normally kept. One of his friends remembered seeing the car keys in his pocket when they went to the mall earlier that day. All of these facts combined branded Nick as the most likely suspect for the crime, although the police still lacked a strong motive or concrete evidence. Those, however, came later with Nick's confession. He broke down after hours of pushing back against the investigating detectives, hours of him trying to poke holes in the detectives' theories.
I could tell you didn't plan this.
Is it because you're a father?
Yeah, he was the straw. Yeah.
But why? Was it physical?
No, it's more sort of like a blast. Probably still. I mean, it wasn't. It was. They were physical. I'm in Boy Scouts, right? Memento. Excuse me.
It's okay, man.
So there's this. I'm almost Eagle. I'm almost done.
You're getting life,
right? Life Scout. And then there's this leadership weekend camp out, whatever thing, and
where was it?
This was Brownsy somewhere up in I forgot, but anyways, I didn't want to go. You know, I'm almost done. Didn't think I needed a leadership camp, so my attitude wasn't great on the trip.
You got pissed?
So he got pissed, and as we're coming home, he hit me.
Was he beating on you too, mentally, or?
It was mentally, and it was like he called me a f- times, and that was the.
You're at life scale, you know. You're at life scale, for God's sakes.
And so that was sort of the beginning, the beginning of it, and it's just.
How long ago was that?
That was this fall.
Okay.
Last fall, and then
You kept it up there.
It kept going, and the little thing just seemed to always reverted back to that one thing, and then, the alcohol thing happened, then they called me taking out the car.
Oh, you got a call before?
Yeah, I got a call before.
He threatened to keep it away from you?
Right.
But the whole time your grades are good? Everything else is?
Grades were good, and last freshman year, I got a D one quarter, but then I got an A the next quarter, so I got a B as well. So that
But he's harping on the D.
Right, harping on the D, and then he'd occasionally hit. I wouldn't call it huge physical beating, but I think
it's still uncalled for.
Right, the emotional, I think. The hit, when he hit me, didn't bother me. It was the constant.
Did he do it in front of your friends too?
Never the hitting, but the yelling and the anger.
Embarrassing.
Yeah. And then for my birthday, which is
a couple
days away, we were supposed to take friends up to Deep Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And this last weekend, he was uptight as usual. And
did he drink or anything? Or?
No, it was never really alcohol. It was just he's overstressed, I think.
Okay.
He works. I mean, he gets up at 5 in the morning and comes home at 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
So then he sort of had his fill being nice and all his climbs when he gets home. Takes it out, dinner not almost, but most nights.
Is he doing the same to your brothers? Or just you?
Maybe, but I didn't.
No.
It didn't seem like that to me, but.
To your mother at all?
Yeah, but a little bit. But the bulk seemed to be generated towards me.
Mm-hmm.
And then Friday night, he was just mad. I don't even know why he was mad. And then I was giving directions on how to get around Fingal's house.
Mm-hmm.
And then he
lost it,
blows out or something. It didn't hit me. He just gets really angry. And we didn't even get lost. He went 2 feet past a turn and just had to make a tight turn.
Come back.
And then you have to put the car in reverse. He got really angry. And then I went back to get the car, and I saw him sitting on the couch. The TV was on. And I knew the gun was out on the workshop bench.
Mm-hmm. What happened?
I walked up. I sat there for a half hour.
He was sleeping?
Yeah, standing over him. And then I went between putting the gun up to his head and pulling it back down and up.
Do you have a pillow up too, or?
No, just the gun. The gun was. I'm not sure if I meant to pull the trigger or if it just went off. And then once that happened, I freaked out, and I thought, they'd all come down, but I don't even know if they woke up or whatever, but so I sat on the couch and they were up, and I just couldn't realize I couldn't just walk away from that. And then I shot my mom. And then
she's still sleeping?
Yeah. I waited for a little bit, then I think she went back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I shot her, and I shot her come back.
Why the brothers, man?
I thought if no one was there to say anything, that my story would go, because I was the only one. I just got scared. I didn't want this to happen.
That's the only true emotion you're showing right now. I just gotta feel at least a little better. I need to know where the gun is, though. We can't have it out there.
It's on Shore Road. put it on the map or whatever.
You may have to take us there.
Sure, it's fine.
Is it?
It's right. Maybe it's in bushes.
You can point out to where it is?
Yeah, definitely.
He retold the story of the murder and why he'd done it. He initially started with his father, but it grew to ensnare the other family members in his desperate attempt to cover up his crime and to escape punishment. This is what is believed to have happened on that night. On February the 1st, 2008, before Nick went to see his friends, there was a minor argument between him and his father, John. John wanted Nick to ride along on a trip to the western point of Maryland the very next day, after he had cleaned the house, but the teenager refused. There was a small argument between them before John dropped Nick off at the Fingals. Nick did not return home until 1 a.m. that night. There he waited in the garage for 30 minutes, after entering through the basement door that he'd asked Gregory to leave open for him. He snuck into the living room with a 9mm pistol, a weapon he picked up from the workbench in the basement. He then pulled the trigger twice, aimed at the back of his father's head. For over 30 minutes, he stood there, paralysed by what he'd done. He waited for somebody to come into the living room. He was certain that the two loud bangs would have given him away. But when no one arrived and the police didn't come knocking, Nick tried to cover up his crime. He then ended his mother in a very similar fashion as he had done his father. She was still upstairs laying in bed. He pulled the trigger twice whilst aimed at the back of her head. Even his brothers were not spared from his calculated rampage. 14-year-old Greg had been the one to open the basement door for him. He likely knew that Nick would have walked past the gun, so in his mind he had to be taken out. And as for brother Benjamin, he was just collateral damage. Determined not to get caught, he roughed up the house a little so that the police would think that their murder was caused by a home invasion. And for this to work, he must dispose of the murder weapon. He tossed it into some nearby bushes before returning to the Fingals at around 6 a.m. like nothing had ever happened. It is unclear whether he fell asleep at some point during the night, and if Alex Smith's phone call really did wake him up. After making his confession, he revealed the location of the murder weapon, and then he was officially arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder on February the 2nd, 2008 at 1:05 a.m. The trial and conviction of Nick Browning was swift and merciless. The prosecution wasted no time arguing for the maximum possible punishment for him. Despite his breakdown in front of the police detective, they painted him as a callous, calculated killer. Someone attended his family because he didn't want anyone to tell him what to do. They also claimed that he simply wanted his inheritance and the life insurance money to himself. His family, including his grandfather, submitted pleas of clemency on his behalf, alleging he was maltreated physically and mentally. Eventually, the prosecution and the defense agreed on a plea deal. Nicholas pleaded guilty in January of 2009, guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 4 life terms in prison with 2 life terms to be served consecutively. If he is released on good behaviour, Nicholas might be eligible for parole in 2031 after serving 23 years in prison. At this time, he is 31 years old. Nick does seem to have matured and says he regrets his actions profusely.
I used a gun to shoot both of my grandparents, Richard and Janet Sweet.
I had the earmuffs on and everything. I took a point like this, stepped up 1 stair so I could see my grandpa's head. Boom, pulled the trigger back, pulled the bolt back, shot my grandpa twice in the head.
There is certainly a body inside, and I noticed a gunshot through the window, and so rather than go in and explore, we're calling you.
Isaiah Richard Sweet's life was marked by difficulties. Born on February the 7th, 1995, his parents Stacey Sweet and Christopher Garley had a tumultuous relationship due mainly to their substance problems. After Isaiah's birth, Stacey had another child with Ronald Kempinski. Eventually though, Isaiah was left in the care of his maternal grandparents, Richard and Janet. At some stage, Isaiah's parents' rights were terminated. This was said to be due to an incident of maltreatment by a neighbour when he was around 4 years old. However, there is uncertainty about the exact event leading to Isaiah living with his grandparents. Throughout his life, the family atmosphere with Richard, Janet and Isaiah was filled with arguments and disagreements. At one point, they moved to Iowa. This was when Isaiah was 7. The plan was to care for Richard's ill mother. His grandparents made the decision to restrict his contact with his mother Stacy, and this continued until she bought him a phone when he was a teenager. When Stacy returned to Iowa in 2010, the arguments began. Isaiah said he wanted to live with her, but Richard and Janet did not let this happen. Stacy eventually gave up and moved back to Pennsylvania in 2012. I should also mention that Isaiah was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder at the age of 4. Attempts were made to seek counselling from Families Inc. in 2011, but this was unsuccessful. Later, Isaiah was recommended for inpatient care due to substance misuse concerns, care which he did receive, followed by outpatient help from the ABB Centre in Manchester. It was at the ABBE Centre where he was diagnosed with ADHD and conduct disorder. The therapist there also highlighted limitations into Isaiah's insight and judgment. They suggested he may be experiencing symptoms of mania, and it was potential that he had bipolar disorder due to impulsive behaviours and risk-prone actions. Isaiah Sweet's interactions with juvenile court services were inconsistent, with referrals in March and December of 2011, and another following an accusation of molestation in April of 2012. In one incident, after a meeting with the JCS, Isaiah leaked from his grandparents' moving vehicle on their way home. He also had a history of multiple times trying to end his own time on this earth, the most recent attempt occurring just before his last arrest. There were also legal conflicts involving Richard with Stacy and his other daughter, Alicia. This was about the distribution of assets from Richard's mother's estate. These disputes resulted in Richard's arrest on a theft charge, which led him to lose his job. According to Stacy, Richard directed his frustrations towards his daughters, and sadly it meant that Isaiah was maltreated to an even higher degree. Apart from a past filled with molestation and violence, Isaiah did have substance issues at this young age. Grandfather Richard was an alcoholic, and it's believed that Isaiah was selling Adderall to Richard. Isaiah began using illicit substances at 14 and was a daily user at the time of his arrest. He admitted to misusing various painkillers and prescription substances, but he denied using meth or injecting substances with needles. He also denied having issues with alcohol or substances altogether, but he did admit to enjoying risky behaviours with friends. This included dangerous stunts like backflipping off of a bridge into shallow water and playing games involving dropping burning cigarettes between friends' arms. He recounted instances of excessive drinking and even recalled a friend burning him 15 times with cigarettes. All of these behaviours are quite extreme, especially for someone of his age. Suspected substance issues led to his commitment by his grandparents in 2011. At 15, Isaiah's alcohol use began to spiral. He dropped out of high school in his junior year with a low GPA of 1.061. Isaiah believed he was smart, but didn't apply himself and put friendships over his academics. He mentioned passing 3 of his GED pre-tests and planned to move to Pennsylvania at 18 to live with his mother and then attend Penn State University. His academic record was marred by multiple suspensions from school. Isaiah had a turbulent and hostile environment at home. He suffered alleged continuous verbal assaults, and he felt mistreated by both grandparents. He mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the stress caused by his grandfather's behaviour. On May the 11th, 2012, Isaiah retrieved a firearm from his grandparents' room. It was loaded with hollow point rounds to minimise their suffering. He put on ear protection to protect his own hearing. He aimed at his grandfather's head from behind and pulled the trigger in a moment of intense hatred. Grandmother Janet yelled, "What's going on?" and Isaiah turned and took her life as well. Isaiah then approached his grandparents, kissed them, expressed remorse, and prayed for forgiveness, recognizing what he had done, wishing he could undo it. Later, he picked up a friend and returned to his grandparents' house. He gathered a sawn-off shotgun, a sharp implement, the firearm used in the murders, along with some belongings and money from his grandparents' wallets. He then stole his grandfather's truck and fled 75 miles to Iowa City. He gave the murder weapon to a friend to dispose of and drove to Cedar Rapids. There he went to parties to numb what he had done, saying he didn't want to think of the murders. He also tried to end his time on this earth every night by trying to suffocate himself, but he repeatedly failed. Isaiah confessed to the murders to multiple people. This included his former girlfriend. The day after the murders, he attended a birthday celebration and then travelled to a party in Iowa City. During his time there, the police caught him for driving with a suspended license. They subsequently impounded the car. As he was taken into police custody, Isaiah falsely told the police that his grandparents were at the Mayo Clinic. He was allowed instead to contact his counsellor, and he was later released to them. Subsequently, Isaiah continued using substances and spent a night in a tent in the woods. On May the 13th, 2 days after the murders, some relatives came to visit Richard and Janet. This was in order to celebrate Mother's Day in America. Janet's daughter was the first one to find them deceased in the living room.
There is certainly a body inside, and I noticed a gunshot through the window, and so rather than go in and explore, we're calling you.
The next day, on May the 14th, Isaiah was apprehended after he was spotted at a Hardee's restaurant. At first he fled, both by car and later on foot, but he was quickly apprehended and arrested. He told the officers that he wished he was the one who was shot. During his interview with the police at the Manchester Police Department, Isaiah admitted to the murders. He recalled being constantly criticised and insulted by Richard. He said it got to the point where Richard was telling him to end his own time on this earth. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he said.
Put those things off you. Probably feel a little bit better.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be good with me, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Grab some of that food, okay, Isaiah? Isaiah, since we haven't officially met, hey, my name's Scott Rieger. Okay, I'm an agent with the Iowa DCI. I'm a police officer. I never don't look like it, but I figure this is a little bit more comfortable for me. So
after this, is there any way I can go to the hospital for this? I cut it open on a rusty fence, and
absolutely.
I'm pretty sure I'm worried about tetanus.
Yep, nope, absolutely. I'm going to show you this here. This is called a statement of rights and an acknowledgement of a waiver, okay?
Right to remain silent. Anything I say can and will be used against me in a court of law. Right to an attorney if I cannot afford one will be appointed to me.
You've got those things down already,
yes, sir.
Okay, let me read these to you. Is that all right?
All right.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. Bow down. When was the last time you had something to eat?
4 days ago.
You haven't eaten anything in 4 days? Right. And we got more food, so if you wallow that stuff down, you want to keep going, we've got more food, we can keep it coming.
Damn, you guys make me feel like I didn't do anything wrong.
Why do you say that?
Well, let's put it like this. I'm not going to be lying to you guys about anything you ask me.
And I appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay.
They're not going to take this from me, are they?
What is it?
This is a real Rolex.
Okay, where'd you get that from?
I found it in a hobo's tent.
Down there?
Yeah, in CR.
Okay, we'll just keep it up there and we'll probably deal with that later.
Cops, there was like 4 or 5 cops in
Cambridge?
Yep.
Okay.
Looking for me.
Okay.
And one of them came up to me, started talking to me, asked if I knew where I was. And I was like, no.
So he didn't recognize you
Yeah, I was
at
like,
all?
no, I don't even know where he's at. Like, I had my hair back to here. At first, he was asking if I saw the other cops. And I was like, nope. And he was like, do you know who Isaiah Sweet is? And I was like, no idea.
Not a clue who that is. What are you thinking the whole time he's asking that?
I'm thinking, how fast am I going to run? As soon as he walks away from me.
What I want you to do right now is just kind of relax, go ahead and eat that food, kind of mound down. Like I said, I want to kind of start and kind of walk back through some things first.
All right.
Okay?
More than anything, I want to know what the brought me to what I did, what's wrong with me.
Sure. Then, you know...
Like, I'm about to start bawling.
Okay. Hey, Isaiah, if you cry, that's totally fine, man. I respect that, okay?
I want to go back so bad.
How come?
Because I loved them so much, and they didn't deserve that. If anyone in that house deserved it, I did.
When you say what happened that night at the house, what happened?
Shot both of them.
Okay. What'd you shoot him with, Isaiah?
An assault rifle.
An assault rifle? You remember what it looks like?
Black.
Okay. What,
Black, bolt action, 10 or more round clip. It's, Czechoslovakian.
Okay.
AR-15.
Okay. Okay. It takes a lot to admit that, Isaiah. Okay. That's not an easy thing to do. Okay, and Isaiah,
I'm
this
not
is...
gonna play dumb with you.
Okay, and I appreciate that. How you feeling right... I mean, you're with me right now, right?
I don't really know, like, much, but...
Okay, well, let me ask you this, Isaiah. You understand who I am.
Yes, sir.
You understand I'm a police officer.
Yes, sir.
You understand that the guys who brought you up here, why they had to find
sir.
you, okay, and they brought you up there. There's nothing medically right now that's preventing you to talk to me.
No, sir.
Right? But you understand the questions I'm asking you right now? Okay, there's no question that you're not smart enough to handle these
I'm
questions.
extremely intelligent.
Okay. And you know what? I get that. I think you are.
I just make stupid choices.
Yeah. And sometimes we do, Isaiah. Look at me.
I'm never gonna be able to go back on it.
No. And that's, you know what, Isaiah, part of this is that what you're doing today by telling me the whole truth as far as what happened, not only what's leading up to it, but what happened during it. I know it's going to be tough to walk through, but we need to do that, okay? And then we need to talk about what happened afterwards, okay?
I sat at home on house arrest all day.
Okay. Were Grandpa and Grandma home?
And then I went down to the basement. There's a door that goes into the garage from the basement. I went up to the garage and then in their room, took the assault rifle out of their room. And then I loaded it with 10 bullets, walked up the stairs, took like a point like this. I had earmuffs on and everything. I took a point like this, stepped up one stair so I could see my grandpa's head. Boom, pulled the trigger back, pulled the bolt back, shot my grandpa twice in the head.
Where was your grandpa sitting?
They were both sitting on the couch.
Okay. And where were you at?
I was on the stairs coming up, like
coming up from that landing? Okay, because I've heard, I haven't been inside your house, but you know, some of the guys were up there the other day and they're kind of going through it.
Hollow point assault rifle rounds. And then I went up to him and I just broke down, started crying. I told him how much I loved him.
He was later charged with murder and held on a $1 million bond.
The couple was found shot dead in their home in Manchester in May of 2012. Sweet was later arrested in Cedar Rapids. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts first-degree murder.
In October of 2013, Isaiah Sweet's case went to trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder. However, during the trial, he reached a plea agreement with the state. He decided to plead guilty to the 2 counts of first-degree murder. The agreement included a recommendation from the state for concurrent sentences. The sentencing hearing was scheduled based on his age and the existing laws. Upon taking the plea agreement, the court conducted an inquiry with Isaiah to ensure the truthfulness of the testimony witnesses would provide based on the stated facts. The district court accepted the guilty plea and ordered a pre-sentence investigation report. During the sentencing hearing in February of 2014, the state presented testimony from John McInerney, a juvenile court officer. The officer provided information gathered from about 10 meetings with Isaiah, meetings that started in December of 2011 after Sweet faced charges for possession of illicit substance paraphernalia. He detailed Sweet's family life, the counselling sought for his behaviour and his mental health issues, and he highlighted his long juvenile record. During the trial of Isaiah R. Sweet, the most contentious witness on the first day of testimony was Brandon Ehlers. Defense attorneys attempted to portray Brandon as someone testifying only to reduce the criminal charges that he faced. He testified that on May the 11th, 2012, Sweet texted him asking about different methods of murdering people, discussing poisoning with substances like cyanide, arsenic and nicotine, as well as asking about loading an AR-15 rifle. Brandon Ehlers said that shortly after midnight on May the 12th, Sweet arrived at his place with 2 firearms and a TV, confessing, "I did it. It's done." The next morning, Sweet allegedly told him he could take anything he wanted from his grandparents' house. Brandon admitted breaking in but left immediately upon discovering the bodies. He said that he was too scared to call the police. Ehlers, who was sentenced to 18 years in prison in September on various charges related to the killings and subsequent thefts, had 2 charges of first-degree murder dropped as part of a plea agreement. A condition of this agreement was his testimony against Isaiah. Following this, Sweet's defense presented the testimony of Dr. Stephen Hart. He is an expert in clinical psychology, specializing in violence assessment and psychopathic personality disorder. Dr. Hart reviewed documentation regarding Isaiah. As well as that, he conducted an interview with him before preparing his report. He concluded that Sweet suffered from severe developmental problems, from mental health issues, challenges in personal relationships, and struggles with educational adjustment. Dr. Hart indicated that Isaiah's decision-making was affected by attention disturbances and impulsivity, attributing these issues at least in part to severe attention deficit disorder. He also emphasized that Sweet's psychological and social immaturity, estimating his psychological and social maturation to be more in line with a 12, 13 or 14-year-old despite being chronologically 17. He highlighted that although Sweet's actions seemed planned, they were not executed with the precision of a seasoned criminal, characterizing them as a poorly executed plan, rather than the work of a well-prepared offender. Dr. Hart concluded his testimony by stating, Isaiah Sweet's prospects for rehabilitation were uncertain and mixed. He suggested there was a possibility of partial or full remission of his symptoms, but couldn't determine definitively whether Sweet might develop a full psychopathic personality disorder in adulthood. Even if he did, the treatability of such a disorder couldn't be predicted. He emphasized that a determination about Sweet's potential for rehabilitation might not be feasible until he reached the age of 30 due to his youth. Isaiah Sweet took the stand last. He expressed remorse, and he discussed the troubled relationship he had with his grandparents. He said that this led to significant trust issues. He appealed to the court to consider his youth and expressed his desire for rehabilitation when determining his sentence. The district court delivered its sentencing on March the 11th. Despite Sweet's age at the time of the murder, which was 17 years and 3 months, and the debatable levels of his maturity, the court also expressed skepticism regarding Dr. Hart's somewhat optimistic view of Sweet's potential for rehabilitation, emphasizing the severity of this case. Isaiah Sweet's case was exceptionally rare. They believed this justified a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The decision stemmed from the exceptionally horrific nature of the murders, a crime which reflected a profound lack of humanity. The court's conclusion was that Sweet was, and would remain, a significant threat to society. Balancing the interests of justice and community safety, the court deemed that these concerns outweighed any mitigating factors. Sweet, however, appealed his sentence to the Iowa Supreme Court. In May, the court prohibited life sentences without the possibility of parole for juveniles convicted of first-degree murder. As a result, Sweet was re-sentenced later that year to life in prison with the possibility of parole. He is currently being held at the Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison. Recently, a 3-member panel of the Iowa Board of Parole reviewed Sweet's case. Despite recognizing his efforts during his 4 years in prison, such as earning a career readiness certificate and participating in rehabilitation programs, the board aligned with the Department of Corrections and recommended against his release. They determined that Sweet would require more time to exhibit the necessary changes before considering parole. This decision aligns with the 2016 ruling by the Iowa Supreme Court, a decision which deemed life sentences without parole for juvenile offenders as cruel and unusual punishments. It was rooted in the understanding, supported by neuroscientists, that teenage brains are not fully developed, making youths more susceptible to peer influence and to impulsive behavior. The case's significance extends beyond Isaiah Sweet's situation. It reflects a broader trend of recent court decisions at state and federal levels. Decisions are to stop the imposition of mandatory punishments for juvenile offenders. The Iowa Supreme Court in particular has been instrumental in these rulings, banning mandatory minimum sentences for all juvenile offenders in 2014, and more recently striking down unconstitutional provisions in laws related to sentencing juvenile offenders to life in prison without parole. Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? What do you think can be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.